It's time for another verse in the song of Sir Waymar P. Royce. I am Matthew.
I am Lucas.
And in today's episode, we are covering episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4 of Season
4.
It's funny because this is actually probably the season that I'm the most interested in. It's also like the season where arguably they start to make the biggest changes too from the source material. They've already been teasing that, but it feels like definitely from like not knowing, but doing research on my own, I feel like this is where they're starting to make huge changes. There's one thing I know for certain that they added to the show that isn't in the books. And so it's interesting to see how they introduce that. And that's in episode 4 that they introduce it. So
yes, and I know exactly what you're talking about too.
yeah.
Exactly. It was very clear when that was going on where I was like, oh, that's different, but okay. Like we'll see how that plays out and what they do.
So I was gonna try and just like disguise who wrote every episode as I was watching it, but then I stopped because after watching episode 1 and I like as I brought my hand down from the credits, I saw it was D.B. Weiss and David Benioff, and I was like, all right. And it was also directed by them, and I was like, okay.
So we know that Sansa's not gonna have much of a role in the episode. Calling it now.
It'll get weird when it gets to like, okay, so there's stuff that we talked about, and you're gonna have to bring them back up in episode 2 and 3 and 4 that left me like going, what? And I think you know which character I'm talking about. It would be foolish to think otherwise, but yeah, I see Lucas nodding already. But do you have any opening remarks before we dive into episode 1?
Yeah, it's the second quote unquote half of Storm of Swords, which just gives you how much of a book Storm of Swords is. I can't believe all that was encapsulated in that book, but it is. And that book is like 1,128 pages. It's ridiculously long. And here's where we get into the discussions too. Well, they're putting a lot into it from the book, but they're also cutting some stuff out. Are these good choices? Are they not? So that will obviously be our continual dialogue.
Well, we're also, when we get into episode 2, I think like we've talked about this before a couple of times, but after reading, and again, if you haven't, since Lucas has not yet seen all of the show and has not read all of A Dance of Dragons, I do not recommend he does this. But after looking at some of the notes on episode 2 of this season, it confirms my suspicion that George R.R. Martin, when he wrote his episodes, he would purposefully try to reintroduce things that the showrunners had dropped for whatever reason. So,
okay.
Yeah, that was confirmed to me by reading it. There's a handful of things, and there's one thing he said about perspectives that I thought was kind of weird, the way that it was phrased, and made me question a little bit on how George R.R. Martin believes point of view works in film and television. But I think it might have also just been that like the writer who was writing that entry on Wikipedia was not very aware of it as well, because he talks about how George R.R. Martin wanted more things to be in like first person perspective, or be in the perspective of certain point of view characters in the episode. Like in the beginning, he thought that the prologue of episode 2 should have been in first person perspective, and it means something different in film than it does in books. So like how you tell the story from a particular character's perspective, which we talked about. But
we'll save that for episode 2.
We'll save that for episode 2.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that for sure.
So
I'm ready to jump in.
Yes. So episode 401, Two Swords, a very fitting title for the beginning of the episode, written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, credited to D.B. Weiss as the director, but they only credit the episode direction to one person because of DGA rules, which they're kind of archaic rules. and it's really weird, but it's also there's a lot of weird stuff that happens with the DGA stuff. So
do you want to go into that? You want to go into it?
Usually you can only credit one person unless you're like a directing duo for DGA specific reward credit. Not reward credits, but for DGA credits, Directors Guild of America credits. A couple of times you can go off of that. Like the Wachowskis are able to. Usually you have to be like brother and sister, or brother or sister, siblings. But that's about it. So they, in order to make sure that they can get directing credit, because if you direct an episode of television, I think you're automatically in the guild, or you get your hours so that you can start paying into the guild and get guild benefits that way.
Is that probably why they say like produced by, but really a lot of the producers end up being kind of directors too?
Not really. So like, it depends on the producer. So the producer and the director have like two very different things. Generally speaking, the producer controls everything that is set up and around the set, and the director controls everything that's happening on the set. So like the producer is in control of like scheduling, confirming locations, budget, releasing actors. They'll do like the call sheet and things like that. And the director talks with like the on-set the on-set department heads, like camera work, costume department, editing, music, and things like that. There's some overlap. That's natural. There's a lot of butting heads, but that's generally the difference. Now, there are some producers
for sure.
There are some producers that are a little bit more hands-on. The big case with that was Poltergeist. Even though Steven Spielberg produced it, he was at the time, I don't remember what he was directing, but he was basically directing two movies at the same time. So they brought in, I think it was, hold on, let me just get this because I want to.
Well, it's really interesting. And it also really gives perspective for me, where I'm just consuming. And I sometimes don't think about the amount of work that goes into it. For example, this work of fiction, I think, I can't remember where exactly I read it, where they say that when you see a book and how thick it is, you know as a reader you're going to be very invested in it. And also the writer was extremely invested in it. And when you read a work like this, and I'm not calling it a book or novel, I'm calling it like a work, because you got all these little storylines going on, and if you reread it, all of a sudden this character's saying this, where you're like, oh, that's because of this. And it all kind of weaves together where deals are made and the reader doesn't know about them, but the author does. How can you sneak it in there without giving anything away? It's just, I mean, that's from the writing side. That takes, oh man, I don't know. It takes like a year, 2 years to write something like Storm of Swords. And then when you read it in like a month. I mean, that's like a year, 2 years worth of work stuffed into like a month's worth of reading. And back to the television, all this work has gone into you watching it for an hour. Like that's mind-boggling to me sometimes. It really, like, you know, splash of cold water, or does put things into perspective, where it's like, oh my gosh, you know, they worked really hard on a lot of this stuff. So although the direction choices, you know, we will discuss, I think I definitely do give major props, especially to the production and the costumes and the armor and the setting all around it. You know, it's a television show. They could do, we know it's not going to be Lord of the Rings quality, because that's a movie with a crazy budget, but they do a good job. Like building a bear pit and taking it down and making sure it's aged. Like that was
right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm.
Yeah. No. I mean, we'll get to it in direction. But the other thing is, like, especially with television, you work with the same people all the time, so you start to get almost like almost secondhand. Like you're finishing each other's sentences. You're placing things where they are. That's why, like, television, as it goes on after the first like 3 or 4 seasons, if it starts to feel stale, that's the reason why, because everyone knows so well that they're not willing to try anything new. So like that's why if you watch like NCIS, it's just like a well-oiled machine. It's not bad because people like consistency, but it also means that they're not necessarily taking as many creative choices. Yeah, I mean, like, I agree with you. I was going to say that a lot of this stuff with, like, the armor and things like that tend to build off of each other, but I still, like, the production design of the show is incredible. There's also some things, I think a lot of what I have to say will come into, like, episode 2.
Okay.
But I do want to start, I will say this, like, as much as I don't think D.B. Weiss and David Benioff are particularly amazing at telling stories in a film or television format, as we've established many times on this show. And it will continue today because episode 403 was like everything that I don't like about their writing. I do appreciate it when they're directing because they will add in things that that I think are really cool. So this one opened with the forging of the 2 swords. Now,
yes,
we were supposed to assume that he destroyed Ice, which was Neddard's sword, but
no, Deddard Stark.
My thing is they didn't really establish the sword as well as they could have. So, like, they have to be like, oh yes, this sword is Valyrian steel, and it was, like, ooh, we have to subtly reference the fact that it was Neddard Stark's sword that we made these 2 swords out of. And I'm like, if you'd done a better job, I probably would have felt the emotional impact of it better. I just knew because I read a summary slightly before where it was talking about, like, destroying the swords. But the process of watching these swords be forged is really cool. So kudos to them for opening the season on a really good note.
I love that little line, too, where Tywin says that there are only 2 smiths in all of the world, and they're both in Volantis, and we got them here to forge it. And then, later we come to realize that House Lannister doesn't have a Valyrian steel sword.
Right.
And they're like the wealthiest family in all of the 5 families or whatever. Well, okay, so it's not really, Italian, but they're the wealthiest house. We all know it's family. But they're the wealthiest house, and they don't have a Valyrian steel sword. I bet it ate at Tywin so bad that Ned Stark had ice. And, J.R. Mormont has Longclaw, which is the one that's now given to Jon Snow. No, Jon Snow. But still.
No, Jon Snow.
Lesser houses have these incredible steel weapons, and it's definitely a sign of amazingness. And House Lannister, me. Now they have swords. Darn it.
Yeah, well, it's kind of also fitting that the only way that they got the swords was to make take someone else's original version and sort of like make a bastardized but gaudy version of their own for it. So it's not even like they got pure Valyrian steel. It had already been refined once. So, True. And it's not even that they're getting a full sword. It's so big that they ended up making 2 of them. And like I said, the hilts are very, intricate and things like that. And it's like, it's everything that the Lannisters are kind of known for. It's like, it's all show, but I don't know, maybe like to me, it's kind of like the purity of the house is reflected in Tyrion, and Tyrion is kind of like this, for lack of a better word, is kind of like a deformed creature in the eyes of them. It's not like this perfect body, but but it's just like, I don't really know where I'm going with this. I hope I can kind of shape an idea for you where it's like
Tyrion has all of the the good qualities of House Lannister, like the mind, but he's extremely flawed. I don't think anybody, and I'm not even talking about his physical stature whatsoever. I'm talking about his character. He definitely has a lot of the nobler things of House Lannister. He has the wit of House Lannister, but he definitely has some character flaws. In the show, they make a huge showing that he is quite the frequenter at brothels.
Yep.
But if you really know Tyrion, he's not like he is, but he also feels bad about it too, because he knows that these women are with him just because of the way he looks, not because he can charm one of them off the street. And in the books, he used to visit Shay by going and traveling to a brothel. So everybody thinks he keeps going to a brothel, and then from the brothel he goes down and he goes over to Shay's manse. through the secret ways that Varys shows him. So Tyrion and Varys are like, they're tight, they're homies. But later on when Cersei finds out, obviously it works a little bit different in the books, but she finds out the whore that he's been sleeping with, and it's of course a different one. But that's when Tyrion freaks out, brings her, and now she's handmaiden to Sansa. So that part is actually the same. They just kind of introduced that earlier in the show. And a part of me is like, is that fine? A part of me thinks no. Because Tyrion was the manager of the whole city, and actually manager of the whole kingdom as the king's hand. And they didn't really do a whole lot. Like they could have shown him at work. And Peter Dinklage is amazing, because I know at certain parts he would say, I was good at it. And because of his acting, he sold it. You
sell it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they didn't show it because, maybe they wanted to use screen time for other things, which is, we chatted about that. But he did all sorts of things. He put in curfews. He was managing people coming in and people leaving. He was doing all these little things, and just, you don't really get to see it in the show. It's probably better suited for literature, to be honest. But like a thing or two here or there would have been pretty cool, showing how deft he is at managing. However, in the end, I think they did a great justice to that at Blackwater, where it's like, yeah, Tyrion pretty much saved the city, but nobody knows or cares. And
right. Like, if you had to summarize the thesis of his story in Clash of Kings, the only thing is, like, and we should get back on top of the episode. Yes. But I mean, I disagree. I think all of the political machinations and maneuvering is something that's really compelling, regardless of format, because like all of that stuff of like restoring your land is really interesting. And well, to me, in Kingdom of Heaven, the director's cut where Balin goes back to his lands and like he has to, find a way to get water to his lands, and they do it in a really creative way. Then again, that's Ridley Scott directing, and Ridley Scott's brilliant. In this, you have directors. You have some directors who are good. Like I think Michelle McLeod, who did the last episode 4, she does a really good job. But like they have a lot of praise for Alex Graves, and I feel like Alex Graves is kind of a meat and potatoes guy. He did episode 2 and 3 of this season. He did a couple of other ones, and he's fine. He's just not. I don't think he does anything that's like dazzling. And like even to the extent, like we'll talk about episode 2, but we're talking about episode 1. And
we are.
D.B. Weiss and David Benioff. So I only have 2 notes. The one is the first 15 minutes of this episode were excellent. So you have the forging of the sword. Tywin gives the sword to Jaime, and they talk about like all of the stuff about like recounting the history and how Jaime only has one hand now, and how Tywin wants Jaime to renounce his knighthood and take control of his lands, which also feels kind of dumb. Like Tywin is stupid. I mean, he's brilliant, but he's also stupid because he's like, I think it's more he's just like born in sort of like this older culture of like, my firstborn has to inherit my lands. And it's like Jaime's proven that he's not good at managing this stuff. And Cersei and Tyrion have proved that they are good at managing this stuff. So like the smart thing would just be to let Cersei have their lands, Casterly Rock, and like control that, or Tyrion. But Tywin can't get his head out of his ass.
Well, part of it is Jaime is like his pride and joy. Tyrion's not.
Right.
Everybody knows that. So, and he was very clear, like, Tyrion is not going to inherit this. And they don't let women inherit lands. So Cersei can't. So it's got to be Jaime. And, well, they dismissed Barristan Selmy. So there's been precedent of having someone who is in the Kingsguard leave the Kingsguard, not by death. So they could make it happen, especially since Tywin controls it. But then, yeah, that's where things get interesting.
But okay, so that's what I mean. Like Tywin, it's like, okay, there's this loophole, and Tywin can use nepotism. But to get him out. But like at the same time, like Tywin's hand to the king. He can easily write a new proclamation and have Joffrey sign it that allows, for example, Cersei to take over. I'm just saying that like Tywin's own, like as smart as he seemingly is, his own prejudices, like any good villain, his own prejudices hold him back from actually being smart enough to do the thing that will actually benefit his line and his house, because he's so blinded by this idea of like Jaime is good at everything that he doesn't realize that aside from swordplay and like maybe like saving a lot of people, Jaime's not going to probably be good at running Casterly Rock. He's probably not going to be good at like managing the lands or anything like that. It's a thought that just occurred to me as we were talking now. So it's amazing how like these blinders are preventing him. Like he can see the shortcomings in everyone and probably even in Jaime, but he's also so blinded by his own like pride on it.
That's what it is. Well, lions, right? They're very proud.
Yeah, I mean,
they're very proud.
And then we're introduced to our first new character, and a character I was really excited for. No, I'm just gonna call him Pedro Pascal.
No, Pedro Pascal.
Or I'm gonna
Prince
call him
Oberyn.
Oberon. No, Prince Oberyn.
Prince Toblerone.
Prince Oberon. And then did you recognize Ilaria?
I did not recognize her.
She's
know
from
her.
Rome.
Oh. Going back to the well. All right.
Going back
HBO.
to the well.
Going back to the well.
So,
I will now call him Prince Toblerone from now on.
No, Prince Oberon.
Yeah, I know. Now we got T-Dog, Toblerone, Jon Snow.
No, Prince Toblerone. I'll probably just keep calling him Pedro Pascal just because.
Deddard Stark.
Deddard Stark.
I'm trying to think of like all the names that we have.
So, how did you like the introduction of Prince Toblerone?
Very different than the books.
Okay, so if you're listening to this, you probably remember in the show he's in a brothel with Ilaria, which at first I was like, is that his sister? And no, I don't think it's his sister.
His paramour.
His paramour. But Toblerone, he likes the boys, but he also likes the ladies, and it's revealed later that he just likes beautiful things. And then Tyrion takes him aside. So Toblerone has an older brother that was supposed to go, but instead the older brother sent his younger brother, and it made Tyrion look like a fool because he was waiting for Prince Toblerone. And then they're like, oh no, he's already at a brothel, to which Bran was upset because Bran was like, we should do all of our dealings and waitings at a tavern because at least that way I can get drunk. So kind of a little...
Bran. Bran. Very good.
Love that Bran. I love Bran and Podrick Payne and Tyrion. They're all great, and they have a really great scene in episode 3. No,
I think it was 4.
Well, they have a great scene in episode 4 as well. But yeah, so Prince Toblerone tells Tyrion, which you probably already knew, the horrible backstory about like Prince Rhaegar Targaryen married Toblerone's sister and had babies with him, and then Rhaegar...
Well, when he died, and they started to sack King's Landing, the one that scares me, the villain number 1 in my book, the mountain that rides.
He's the main villain to you? He's the worst?
He's very scary to me. He's very scary. He just frightens me. Like, he's that horror creature, the villain in the horror movies that like you just don't want to ever be around ever, and you're upset that somebody like that is alive in the world, and it like freaks you out. That's the mountain that rides for me. It's like, if I was in Westeros, I'd just be like, I don't know why, I'm very afraid of the mountain. Like, he's nowhere near here. He's 1,000 leagues away. Yeah, but I'm very scared of him. He puts people to the sword, and not kindly. So, yes, in real life, people are scared of other people that they just, like, exist. The mountain that rides is the one for me, and he's in literature. But it scares me that he, like, exists and is in the world. Very scary to me.
I feel like the book does a better job of setting him up as this, like, great source of fear. I don't think that they do it as well in the show. Like, they have moments where they announce it, but I don't think, like... they've had scenes where he doesn't have his helmet on and you see his human face and stuff. And I think that was in the book too, but I just remember him being a lot more of like the Spectre. Or if I were doing the show, like make sure that he's known enough that like you should always be afraid of him. Things like that. I don't know.
They did a great job in season 1 establishing him as a very scary villain, but then they kind of let that one go. And actually, to your point, I think it would have been very interesting because you've only ever seen him in armor, but there are times where he doesn't have his helm on. And to your point, how interesting would it have been if you had never seen his face? You just see him like this huge knight with this scary helm on like all the time. And he wields a great sword, and he's so big, he can, like ice. Ice is a great sword. It goes up to Deddard Stark's like chest. He can wield a great sword with one hand, and he chops people in half, like from helmets to navel and below. Like it's just with one hand because he's that huge and that scary, and he's really evil. Like he's very dark and very into like torturing and hurting things. Like whatever you imagine to be scary, like it's him. Maybe it's too scary. It might be too over the top, handlebar twirling mustache, but it isn't. It works. I don't know why. I don't know why, because it could be, he's evil for evil's sake, and he is, but he's scary. I think one reason why is probably because he's not in charge.
Right. He's the henchman. Well, it's also like, if you look at Bane at the beginning of, The Dark Knight Rises, he's intimidating, and he doesn't seem like a mustache-twirling villain.
That's true.
And it's like the more information you have, the more information they give you, the more a person talks, the less... In some ways, if you're doing it wrong, the less intimidating they can be, especially if it's just a force of evil. If it's just like a moving force of evil, it becomes less intimidating if you start trying to give them motives instead of just like it's a force of chaos.
Kind of like the Joker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people just want to see the world burn. Right, yes, he does. I'm sorry, let's go back to I'm like super scattered today.
It's okay. So, yeah, I like their introduction. How is he introduced in the book?
Because it's Tyrion's POV, and they meet, and he's writing, and already Tyrion's like, this is not Prince Doran, who's the older brother. This is Toblerone. So they ride together, and he's just like saying all this horrible stuff, and you're like, oh my god, like, who is this guy? And Tyrion's like, I don't know how to respond. Like, I feel like I need to defend myself verbally, but at the same time, I don't want to upset him because he brought all and they don't really know the Dornish people that well. They're at the southernmost part of Westeros. They kind of keep to themselves. So, in a way, Tyrion
Is Highgarden in Dorne?
Highgarden is not in Dorne. Highgarden is to the west and a little bit north of Dorne. But Highgarden and Dorne do not get along. And there are lots of fights that break out in the books where the City Watch has to go and break them up. And it's always the Tyrells versus the Martells. And even their names sound similar. It's like, it's hard to kind of keep them straight. But anyway. Yeah, so they're kind of wondering what they're there for, and it's basically like, well, we're here for justice. Like, that's really why we're here. There's a wedding, but we're here for justice. That was promised.
Okay. One thing I'll say is one of the things I liked was Toblerone confronts two of the Lannister men who are like kind of, being cocky or whatever, and he's like, and they have a standoff, and he's like, draw, and he just like pushes a knife through one of the guy's hands, like while he's trying to reach for his sword, and I was like, all right, they're trying to establish this character. Like,
that was awesome.
I was like, all right, I can get behind it because it's Pedro Pascal, and even when he's a bad guy, I like him. But yeah, I thought that was again, I think they could have established him in a more economic way if they needed to, because the beginning where it's like, oh, we're going to show boobies and we're going to show male ass. And it was just like, okay, this is very gratuitous scene. That's fine. And then they get to the action scene, and it's like super fast. And I was like, all right, well, was shorter than I would have liked, but okay, cool. So I like the way that they introduced him. They didn't really do a good job of introducing Ilaria, which I mean,
that's okay.
We'll see if she has a huge. I mean, yeah, we'll see if she has a huge effect on the show. But I'm trying to get a map of Westeros up.
I really liked his entrance in the show too. Like, if you were to ask me which one do you like better, I could go either way. To be honest, I'm okay with the book's intro, and I'm okay with the shows. I think the shows is a little bit more dramatic, and probably especially for television, it's probably the way to go.
Right.
But in the books, obviously things are a little bit different, and that's fine. I thought it was a good entry. I thought they did the character justice there, and I felt like it was actually in character, which is surprising. Yeah. But I think I probably mentioned that I've always felt that D.B. Weiss kind of had his hand to the pulse of the story and the spirit of it. I felt like D.B. Weiss kind of had that.
Okay.
But, you know. Oh, man. To be in on those rooms where they're discussing how to do the show. Like, that's... To be a fly on the wall for those discussions, I would have been... I would definitely have liked to hear a lot of their talks and decisions and stuff. I think that'd been kind of fun. But this was definitely one that I agree with. You don't?
It's what I agree with. I wouldn't have wanted to be on the wall of it. I think I would have just been like, I just listening to the inside the episodes after every episode just like gets me mad.
It does
every time I watch it.
Yes.
All right. Let's see. So let's finish up. Let's finish up everything in King's Landing.
Sure. Oh, but yes, the deaths of Rhaegar's children and his wife were horrible, and they were Dornish. Rhaegar married a Dorne, and they got completely destroyed by the Mountain. He was the one who was the agent at the time. He didn't have to do it. He didn't have to do it like that, but he did because he's very scary.
Because he's evil.
He's evil, and that's So, yes, I just wanted to put the little tie on that little bow.
Yeah, and it's cool. It sets up revenge, but we'll see what happens with that. All right, so Shae tries to rekindle her romance with Tyrion, and she's seen by a handmaid who tells Cersei. Jaime tries to renew his relationship with Cersei, and Cersei gives him a cold shoulder. I really enjoyed that scene. Bran tries... Oh! No, that's not... Okay, it's not this episode.
So the only other thing of note that I can think of is Sansa getting approached by, "No, Sir Dantos, the Fulio." And he says, "Oh,
yes.
Oh, please wear this. This is the beauty of my house for saving my life. I would love it at the wedding." Sansa, of course, obliges.
Yeah, it's weird. So we talked about this in like how they introduced this storyline, and we'll talk more about it in episode 3. But it was also, but to me, it was just like, why? Like, we haven't seen this guy in 2 years because you see him at the beginning of season 2. So why are they reintroducing this storyline now? And we end up getting a payoff in season 3, but it's also kind of like, you guys knew this was coming. Why did you choose to start? Like, I don't. It frustrated me. It frustrated.
Now that you know the whole story, now you know why I was really like, why aren't they doing this with Sansa's character? Because they could have set this up way back in season 2, where the payoff would have been so much stronger. You could have set it up because before you could be like, oh my gosh. Does Sansa trust Dantos? Will Dantos get her out? Will this happen? Like, can she escape the horrible thing that's happening to her? And then later, they've been developing that relationship through like a book and a half, basically. And that's when he asks her to wear, and in the books, it's a hairnet instead of a necklace. minor detail, but it was important to me. Definitely the necklace is much better for a television show, so I'm okay with that for what's to come. But like they could have been establishing it from like so early on, and then just to have it there at the end would have been like, oh my god, he was in on it the whole time? And the answer is, yeah, he was. But nah, instead of having like multiple layered things going on, like can Sansa get out? Can she trust him? Can she not? Is this guy gonna deliver? And he's working for Peter Baelish, and like all that stuff. Like now they're just gonna, we'll just throw it in at the end.
We're just gonna rush.
Sansa. Right.
We're gonna rush through this because they don't, because D.B. Weiss and David Benioff don't really know how to establish multiple layers. Which, you know what? Screw it. We're gonna talk about the Wall quickly because
let's do it quickly.
We're gonna talk about it quickly, and then we'll go to Slaver's Bay, which had the only other major significant thing to me that I haven't mentioned yet. So at the Wall, Jon's interrogated by the Night's Watch for killing Qhorin Halfhand.
Did you recognize Janos Slynt? He was the old captain of the Night's Watch from King's Landing. Yeah,
I did. Yes! And he's already like sowing his own seeds of manipulation in there. I liked that. I was also kind of like, I thought we had established that this guy who doesn't like Jon is like not as mad at him. And I understand like the reason he might be mad at him again is because Jon killed Qhorin Halfhand, and then was with the wildlings for a while. But that whole interrogation scene just seemed like, it seemed interesting. Like they had to get certain information across, and they did. I don't know. It just felt like a waste of time to me. Like I'm looking at some of these things and I'm like, wow, that was a waste of time. I guess they just had to reintroduce it. Like, hey, we need to remind you that Jon is here. We need to remind you that Ygritte is here. We need to remind you of these things.
I didn't think it was a waste of time.
I think it's an interesting scene, but like I'm also kind of like, I don't know. I just wanted I guess my continual problem is like I want more stuff to happen in these stories per episode. Right. And I know it can be achievable because episode 2 and episode 4 do this.
Yes.
So that's why it's frustrating to me. Like to the point of like the stuff that happens in Slaver's Bay that happens in this episode and in episode 3 could have been combined together into one episode. So like this is where I'm getting frustrated with the show. So that's why because like I barely remembered what happened to Jon Snow in this episode, even though it's a pretty good scene. It just feels like.
Yeah, I actually remember very clearly that he was doing this because for one thing, it was promised Tyrion did send Janos Slynt to the Wall, and there he is. Like that's kind of cool. That's kind of
I liked that.
That's always like a reminder. Like there's people in this world, and then they move and they do things. They're around. Like that was really cool. The other thing that was cool was when you're watching the show, this is the season premiere. It's like the season to kind of set up and give you little hints at things to come. So I was okay with it. There was one thing I was not okay with. I don't understand the time. Like, when was he having this conversation? How soon after he collapsed coming to the Wall to having this conversation? That's like the one thing that I want to know. Because in the books, he's got this arrow in his leg, he's delirious, and he takes a lot of time to heal, and he's feverish, and he has to go up in front of them, and he's all sweating and just in horrible, healing pain. But Master Aemon's healing him, and he does a damn good job. And he ends up healing Jon perfect. Jon still has to flex the fingers of his burned hand, though. I think they showed that, too. I think they showed him doing that.
I think so. It's funny because there's other things. Oh, I was watching the Count of Monte Cristo, the 2001, 2002 Count of Monte Cristo.
With Jim Caviezel and a young Henry Cavill.
Yes, but there's a moment where Jim Caviezel's hand gets cut, and I was like, man, if in different hands, they would have had him constantly flexing that hand to remind him that his friend betrayed him. And I was like, ooh, I have learned something from
And for those who are listening right now, like, no, I'm talking to you, Mario. Are you flexing your right hand right now? Because I Matt and I are both flexing our right hands as we're talking about this.
When we think about the burn thing, or like rubbing my leg, if I think about the wound.
Yeah, and when I read it too, he flexes his fingers on his burned hand. I'd like unconsciously do the same thing. I'm like, why am I doing this? Somebody's like walking by, like, oh man, he must be gripping that book so hard he has to like flex his fingers. So intense, must read. Oh, my hand.
This is such a page turner. It's so intense. They look at the book and there's no markings on it. It's like, okay, so what's he doing? All right, I'm gonna go. So in the north, Tormund and Ygritte they meet like the cannibals who are like
the Magnar of Then.
Yeah, they just meet. They meet a bunch of like cannibals who are just like evil for evil's sake.
They're evil folk. I guess they exist. Not as scary as the mountain. Still not. Yes, people eating not great. But the mountain would do it while they were alive. So yeah, not as evil as the mountain.
Well, if this show and this series has taught me anything, it's that there are many, many, many levels of evil. Like every time you think, hey, maybe Joffrey's like the worst. It's like, well, no, Tywin's still pretty bad. No, as we'll find out a little bit about Ramsay's pretty bad. Heck, even what's his name, Roose Bolton is pretty bad. So
Bolton.
different levels of evil. Okay, so
my wife would definitely interject and say, "Are they really evil, or do they just have like their own agendas and they're trying to accomplish their own thing?"
No, these people are evil. or even like Peter Baelish, like he has his own agenda, but also the way that you go about accomplishing your agenda tells you if you're a good person or an evil person. And Tywin, like, think about it this way. Like, do you see Tywin as an evil person?
No.
Why?
Because he's doing it for the family. However, when you watch him act and you watch him up there, you don't think he's very evil. But then you realize that it was him that was making the deal with the phrase to kill the young wolf at a wedding. And that is very evil.
So there are people who are shades of gray, but there are people who are just bad people. Joffrey is just a bad person.
The Mountain. Ramsay.
The Mountain is a bad person. Ramsay doesn't show any signs of remorse, delights in torturing people and breaking people's spirits and minds. The way that Tywin goes about putting his family on top is not with any sort of righteous deed. He only cares about he's like Peter Baelish. He only cares about getting to the top. What rules does he play by? Any rules that will grant him that, whether it's fair or it's cheating, whether it follows proper decorum or doesn't. He doesn't care who he has to go over, kill, humiliate, or destroy.
He's definitely willing to kill people. Yeah.
To me, that's evil. Like,
yeah.
I think the show undercuts this because he before you really get to know who he is, he's kind of charming to Arya. And I think that kind of dulls the blade, and it's like, oh, well, maybe he isn't as bad. And it's like, no, you kind of want that character to be bad.
Yeah.
Like, especially at this point, do you remember how he acted in season 2?
But, like, do you get evil fatigue from this show? Where you're like, oh, he's actually a good guy. Like, oh, wait, no, he's not. Oh, yeah, he's really bad. He's just not wielding the sword.
I don't get evil fatigue because we have enough characters that are we have enough characters that mean well,
yes.
or who come from a motive to do good. There's enough characters who care more about the people, and I guess that's the easiest way to determine whether they're, especially in this world, whether they're a force for good or not, is who do they fight for? The people who fight selfishly we don't tend to be in favor of. But the people who care about the populace, who care about the people, who care about saving or helping people, we root and we fight for. So that's my metric. And there are plenty of people like that. And then there are some people who we just like because it's like they seem fun. But like Daenerys fights for the people, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yes.
Jamie fights for the people. He saved all of King's Landing.
He did.
Like
500,000 people. I
Jon
don't
Snow-
think King's Landing has that many people, by the way. I don't think it does. That's too much.
Oh, but did you like how Prince Toblerone mentioned the stench of the city?
I did. Yes.
At least someone did. I appreciate that they tried to get more minority characters into the show. Okay. So I have nothing to mention about in the North. Do you have anything to comment on?
No, except we got except that the actor for who plays a Stir, the Magnar of Fen, really likes to play this role. They had some of the behind the scenes, some of the extras that they have on the HBO Max, and he's the actor's in his garb, and he's just like, I am the Magnar of Fen, so powerful. It's like, yes, excellent. Oh,
there are evil characters that I find annoying.
Don't spoil it too much, but like, you're gonna play your role well, sir. Play your role well. Just eat it up while you're on screen. Just take all that screen and you just live every last second that you can and I'm gonna stop there.
Okay. All right. So the only other major significant thing for me was in Slaver's Bay. This is where I think you combine two of the things together. So in Slaver's Bay, we have a new character. He's not a new character.
Yes, Dario Naharis. And I looked at that Dario and I thought, he's not the first Dario. And then I also thought, he's also not the Dario from the books, who has a trident beard, a gold tooth. His upper mustache is gold, and his trident beard is like purple. So, neither of them are Dario, but that's okay. Like, I actually don't care.
I don't like the first Dario, so I'm glad they recast him.
Really? I like the first Dario.
I didn't like the first Dario. And maybe this new one plays it too differently, but like, he's like, I'm the first Dario is like, I'm the first Dario, and I love beautiful things. And I'm like, you're one ugly and creepy man.
But it's Francis.
What?
Francis. From Deadpool.
Oh. He's also the guy who gets his face chopped off in Alita Battle Angel. I still don't like him. I think he's creepy. Like, I think he's
supposed to be kind of creepy.
Yeah, but I think he's creepy and not charming. And I think that if there's a problem with this guy, he's too charming and not creepy. But I'm okay with it.
I like the first Dario, but this. Do you think the second one's charming?
I do. I like him.
I feel like the second one is too like Boy Scouty.
I think he kind of reminds me of like a Flynn Rider type. That's why I like him.
Yeah,
he's kind of like he's a bit more like a rogue. Now, again, the show Dario is probably different than the book Dario. But,
I know. I gotta get my mind around that.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff like that. So, like I said, I like the change because I like the actor.
No, when he's facing off against Gray Fox, they're both holding up the thing, trying to like who's gonna hold it longer.
I liked that. I like that. I like that scene. I like the idea of the when it's like, oh, how many of them are there? There's 126, and okay, we'll take them down and bury them, and we'll do it for every single one on our way to the road.
There's 160.
And like I literally forgot about that the next time she appears because she's not in episode 2.
Was this the episode where Dario gets to show his stuff too?
No.
No? Oh, okay.
Nope. That's why, like, you put both of them.
Yeah. They should have both been in here.
You put both of those moments in this episode, And then guess what? You have a completed arc for that episode
Yeah.
of Daenerys. Like, the only completed arc we have of this whole thing, two of them, Jaime and Arya. Arya and the Hound have a completed arc. Jaime has a completed arc. Like, but every episode should have it. Like, every story you're telling in the episode should have something that feels fundamentally moving it forward instead of just, like, measurably moving it forward. But that's always been a problem, right?
Like, I could see that because, you know, Daenerys went up to this city, Astapor, and she got the Unsullied. Then she went over to another city, Yunkai, and, you know, set it free with, like, 3 people. Versus a battle in the night, you know, where they killed a bunch of sellswords while they were drunk going crazy, and they killed them all, and then that happened. But still, they needed more than 3 people. No, I don't actually mind that what happened because that's what happens. But I did mind that it was only 3 people. Anyways,
yep.
I'm sorry. Yeah, and now it's like, oh, well, now this is the biggest and the baddest of all of them. You know, Marine. Oh, it's like,
oh,
okay.
Is it? I didn't get that feeling. I just thought it was another stop.
Marine's pretty special because it's on the coast, so it's got trading going on from the coast, and it's got these huge walls that are a huge problem. And in the books, she comes with, like, all of her army and all of her freed slaves because they follow her. They follow Misa. And they're hungry. People eat.
Right.
And she has to feed so many folks, and she has no food. And in the books, it's, like, dire. All of a sudden, it's like, oh my gosh. Like,
it was dire in season 2. In the first 2 episodes of season 2, it was dire, but now it doesn't matter.
But now it's not.
Her army moves and it's fine. They don't care about the logistics of feeding it.
They do in the books. But the other thing that I think they could have done was have Marrow, the Titan's bastard, who was like, he was actually kind of hilarious in his one scene before Dario killed him. He ended up escaping. Yeah, he ended up escaping from Yunkai, and he comes to assassinate Daenerys here. I had to check to make sure I got the detail right, and that's when Barristan Selmy beats him down, and it's just like, actually, I'm a knight and I'm a really good fighter. And then he got, like, super upset that he let the assassin get that close to her. Like, you're just like, oh my god, he's like Secret Service on the next level in Westeros. Like, and I don't know, I want more Barristan Selmy, damn it. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my Daenerys rant. I'm good. I said my piece.
I mean, I can even. Okay, we're not. Yeah, let's not get into this now because we're probably already talking way too much about this episode.
Probably.
Do you have anything else to say about Slaver's Bay?
I do not.
Okay, so the most interesting thing, the other main story was Sandor Clegane, aka the Hound, and Arya. And it's a nice little, it's literally a nice little story. Arya wants her own horse. Sandor doesn't trust her. And they have, like, another discussion about how, like, I think, like, you know, like, has she ever killed a man or something like that? And she's like, I've killed someone, but not a man. And
oh my god, that happens in this episode?
They go to the inn. You remember this?
Yeah.
They go to the inn, and the person who had her sword was there. And before the Hound even has a chance to really, like, figure out if, like, because he doesn't want to fight 5 men. But Arya's already going inside, and the men are like, oh, you're the Hound, blah, blah, blah. Hey, get him a beer. And, like, the way that the scene escalates is really good.
It was a good scene. I love that scene. I forgot that was in this. This was so... I love this part. Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so... like, you know, they're drinking, and the way that they pace. This is why I think that D.B. Weiss and David Benioff are great directors for their own writing, because they were able to pace this scene really well, and they were able to have a lot of fun with it.
This was a great scene.
But it ends up breaking out in a brawl, and in a direct betrayal of what happened last season, where 3 people were able to take down an army. One person struggled to take down 5 men. Arya cuts the legs of the person, brings back a line from season 2, and then slowly kills the person. As a reward, Arya gets her own horse.
Yes.
Explaining a plot badly. But I really liked...
It was so good, though.
I really liked that story. I really liked all of the beats and that moment, and it was a fitting way to end that episode. I thought it was great all around. It was fun to see their relationship develop in a positive way like that. It's like lone goat and kid, or lone wolf and cub / lone goat and kid.
Lone wolf and cub. Arya is a Stark from Winterfell. Their sigil is the wolf, and she's a young
and he's
one,
a hound.
and he's
So
I know. It's
do you have? What are your thoughts on it?
Different characters were killed. It was the Tickler, and I think it was. No, I don't think the Sweetling was there. Rast the Sweetling. I think it was just the Tickler, who was the torturer. But yeah, when it was so fitting when I read it. I read my eyes out when she held that dagger up, just like, where's the gold? Where's Beric Dondarrion? Where's the Brotherhood Without Banners? Where's the gold? Blah, blah, blah. And he was just like, like crying and wetting himself because he was doing that to others. And
right.
Like, that's right. Bam. And she had the super satisfying conclusion of killing him. And, obviously killing isn't good, but when somebody's been doing that to like a lot of other people, in this world where you get it was very fitting. It's just it was a really good scene. It was a really good scene.
Yeah. It's a good story because it's a story. You can watch that section isolated and get everything you need to know about that whole thing. It's storytelling.
Sandor got a chicken too. It made it look so good.
He did. All he wanted was some food.
That's
he
all
wanted
he
some
wanted.
food and some ale. The only thing I had about the inside the episode was what I said before about ice and how we never really, like, it's established, but not as well as, at least so many years out, it's not established that that sword is ice as well as I feel like they wanted. So that's it.
Okay. I agree. I'm good in episode 1.
All right, let's get to another one of the most one of a lot of people see as one of the best episodes of the series. Spoilers: last episode George R.R. Martin wrote for the show.
Really? This is the last one he writes for the show?
I believe this is the last episode he wrote for the show. The Lion and the Rose, which is fitting because it's a wedding. Yeah, let me just confirm this. I'm like 90% certain that's the case.
Well, the Lion and the Rose. The Lion, obviously, House Lannister, and the Rose is House Martell. I'm sorry. I keep mixing them up, obviously. Sorry, House Tyrell from Highgarden. Their sigil is the Rose. Martell? Tyrell? It just bugs me because their last names rhyme. That's like what's getting to me. They're both 2 syllables, and they both have like the same kind of L in the last name. That's why I keep mixing them up. Sorry. And then I just think Mace Tyrell, and then I got it.
Yes.
That's how I can figure it out.
We're finally introduced to Mace Tyrell.
We are. No, the fat Fulio himself. He's so funny. He's a great character. Great character. Completely useless in the world. He's completely useless, and that just gives me no end of humor.
It's all right. So let's start this episode from the beginning.
Yes,
because it opens with a woman running in the forest being chased by hounds.
Go ahead.
And we're introduced to
I would just spoil it and run right through it.
No, yeah, I mean I'm going to too. She gets caught by an arrow, and we find out the hounds are owned by Ramsay Snow, and it's just like another notch in the quiver for a bad metaphor of why Ramsay Snow is evil. He's chasing this person for I don't think any reason. I don't remember why. I think for sport. and then the hounds go and eat the woman. Ramsay goes back.
Yeah.
And this is something I forgot. Roose Bolton. Oh, that's right. No, Roose Bolton gets a new wife because the Frey gives him a wife.
That's right. Yeah. For his part in the Red Wedding.
And
the joke is that not only does he get to choose the wife, but however much she weighs, that's how much pounds that he gets in gold from the Freys.
Right.
And so he picks the fattest one so he can get the most gold.
All right, so...
Oh, Roose.
I mean, you know.
Roose.
So Roose is mad at Ramsay because he's basically turned Theon into this cowering slave who doesn't have a thing. And Ramsay sent the thing to the...
Bandon Greyjoy.
The Greyjoys, which... By the way, it's been 4 episodes, and we have not seen the Greyjoys. So we were talking about reintroducing these characters into the episodes, right? We're talking about introducing the characters into the episodes and how, like, oh, we need a place marker of where Jon Snow is and all this stuff. Ramsay, Snow, and Theon weren't in the first episode. So, like... anyway, I'm not going to hold on to it. So... They show how Theon has mental control, or how Ramsay has mental control over Theon. They reveal that that Bran and Rickon and Shaggy Dog and Summer are still alive. Yay! And they send... I don't know who the actor is, but I feel like I've seen that actor. What's that character's name? The sellsword who...
Locke.
Okay. So I have...
Right. I'm so glad I wrote that down. Locke lives, by the way. Okay, so quick word on Locke.
Yes.
Vargo Hoat the Goat was the slobbering fool. He was the leader of the Bloody Mummers, aka the Brave Companions. They're the sellsword company from, across the Narrow Sea. Anyways, so before Brienne has to fight the bear... Brienne is going to be raped by Vargo Hoat, but she bites his ear off, and the wound festers. Well, Brienne is rescued by Jaime. They go on their merry way, but then Tywin sends the Mountain down there, and the Mountain kills... Well, actually, as we speak, as what's going on in this episode, the Mountain's actually in Harrenhal right now, and he is basically... putting them to the sword. And, he does kill Vargo, poor Hoat the goat, but he chops off his limbs one by one, a la law-abiding citizen style. Right? That's the name of the movie, right?
I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen Law Abiding Citizen.
Gerard Butler?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Jamie Foxx.
Yes, that's right. Basically one limb at a time. So both go the hands, then go the feet, and then they slowly climb their way up. And but I don't want to give any spoilers away of why he couldn't finish the job the way he wanted to. Like I said, evil. Matt, you're like, okay. Like, ooh, sorry, I got really dark
because
there.
Because Locke is so, like, in these 3 episodes, we find out Locke is pretty significant.
Yes, and I'm so glad I wrote this down. But Locke is going to hunt Bran and Rickon.
Right.
And I did not realize that. And then when I saw him again in the later episode, I totally forgot about this conversation. Absolutely 100% forgot about it.
Yep. I think they do enough to kind of remind... Because I remembered it when I was watching episode 4, which is when they reintroduced it.
Good for you.
This is the hard part about... This is the hard part they run into with where they tease, like they introduce concepts in one episode. You have to bring it back in. And now I guarantee that they would bring it back in maybe on episode 5 when we watch it, or 6, when they actually storm that location, which is name I can't remember right now. But
Craster's Keep or Castle Black?
What? The Casterly Keep.
Oh.
Craster's Keep. Craster's Keep. I'm sorry. Yeah. But anyway, okay, so
But yeah, that's all I had about the Dreadforts.
I don't have any notes, so yeah, that's all I have at Dreadfort.
Shall we go to the I've got one other thing before we can do the excitingness in King's Landing. This is the only other thing like outside of King's Landing that I think is of any note. Stannis is burning folks.
Yes. We'll talk. Stannis is burning folks and Bran.
Oh, yes.
So, yeah, Melisandre orders men to be burned, including Selyus's brother, as tribute to the Lord of Light.
Wow, I did not know that was him.
Yeah, they mentioned it. They were like, burning your own brother. You're like Davos was like, you're burning your own brother.
Yeah, I missed that.
And she's like, didn't you see? He ascended to a better place. And to be fair, in George R.R. Martin's original script, I'm gonna make mention of his original draft as per Wikipedia, so
sure,
I can kind of fill you in on some of this stuff. But each flame was supposed to turn a different color, and then you were supposed to be able to see the spirits leave their body.
Wow.
That did not happen in the show. You just see them burn. I kind of wish that the flames changed a different color, if only like slightly off red or off, do something subtle. But in order to do something like that, you probably have to be, a good director. Anyway, we're not going to go on that. Alex Graves is a fine director. He's just very meat and potatoes. And again, also, who knows what kind of editorial process the script went through when they had to slash things for it.
Right.
Did anything else? Okay, so Melisandre speaks with Shireen about her faith. I don't remember that at all. Where she talks to the daughter about faith.
Don't remember that at all
either. Okay. Did you have anything else to say about Dragonstone?
No. Just okay. He's burning folks.
And then beyond the wall, Bran touches the weirwood and has a really strange vision.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, his visions. Oh, man. Whew. The Iron Throne in snow.
Yes.
In Jon Snow. And then you have the dragon over King's Land. The dragon's shadow flying over King's Landing.
Yeah, in what looked like a miniature shot. I knew it was an all-digital shot, but it looked like a toy. It looked like a little dragon toy shadow going over a little toy of King's Landing.
What's that production company? Is it like WB? The one where they like, or is it like 20th Century Fox? The one where they like show the city and then it pans up to like the water tower or something? Like there's like at the beginning of some movies, like you see like the city and it's like panning. That's what it reminded me of. I'm like, oh, I'm watching a production company's like promo. Yeah. Oh wait, it's still the middle of the episode.
No, it's still a show. It might have been WB, because WB had where they would show the studio and then like the studio ends up turning into the logo. Like it flips over and turns into the logo.
Yeah, that might have been it.
The other one is Miramax, that shows the city and zooms out and you see Miramax written, and then
I think that's might be it.
But all of this looked like tilt shift photography. So just look up tilt shift photography and you'll know what I mean. It's okay. You'll know what I mean.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I will. Tilt shift photography.
So they had a lot of cool visions, including Deddard Stark.
Yeah, cameo.
So one thing was, I figured that as soon as Sean Bean was killed off in season 1, he'd never return. Now they obviously used archival footage. Apparently there was supposed to be more footage. Like, again, in the original draft, they would show some of the characters who were significant in the past, kind of leading up to when Bran gets pushed out. And then they would touch upon all of the different characters where they were right now. And then they would show elements of the future, including pretty much what we saw. But I think there was like a handful of other things. So, and apparently there were a lot of they would have showed King Aerys burning Stark's father and brother. Deddard's father and brother. They were going to show some of that.
That was never mentioned in the show. I don't think I remember that Jaime did not tell Catelyn, And that was the only time I heard about their death. And that's right. They could insert that in the show. They could have did that in that conversation. They chose not to, and now they put it back in the. So George R. R. Martin probably wanted that to be known, so he put it in the script so that way the viewers could see that, and then they still said no. Now I understand that would have been like a major like production value thing for only like 2-second screen time. But you could just had like 3 people standing around and then just digital effects it, and you don't even have to do a good job, right? Because it's only going to be on screen for like 1.5 seconds.
It would have been so. I mean, I think I agree. I think that the showrunners don't really care, because the people who are interested in a lot of this stuff will look it up online. But it would have been tough to establish, like I was gonna say, it would have been tough to establish, but I do think that you could have. I thought of a couple of ways you could have established, like, who is this person? Are they a Stark? How can you tell it's Ned's father? How can you tell it's Ned's brother? How can you tell what's going on? However, if you just have that scene in the show, then the people who read the books would be like, I like that. It's a little cameo. Cool, I'm glad they included that in, but unfortunately, it wasn't in there. So yeah, but
now,
there were
you told
more
me I shouldn't
scenes.
read this. You're telling me I shouldn't read like.
Don't, you shouldn't read it. I'm trying to tell you some of the stuff, but you shouldn't read it because
Okay.
it will spoil some upcoming things, not only in the show but also in the book.
Okay,
So,
got it.
but yeah, that's all I have for Beyond the Wall.
Same.
So let's go to the most exciting place. We're going to King's Landing.
We're going to King's Landing.
So
all
it's
right, I'm so excited.
the first thing, and I think the like kind of like the most fun thing.
Yes.
Tyrion encourages Jaime to learn how to fight with his left hand, and in order to do it discreetly, they have to employ someone, and the person that they get is fan favorite character Bran. Fan favorite and podcast favorite-ish character. I don't know how you feel. When you contextualized him as, like, think of him like Toshiro Maifune in Yojimbo and in Sanjuro, I was like, heck yeah, I'm down for that. So I understand the people who love Bran. I think he's great.
Me too. He's awesome. Yeah. No, I think that's really cool. Doesn't happen that way in the books. He like tries with his left hand but doesn't. So it's really cool that they do this in the show. Like it's definitely diverging, but it's really cool.
Does he just give up being a sword fighter?
He doesn't. This happens later in Feast for Crows. He basically okay. So it gets really interesting after A Storm of Swords because it. We won't go into it. So it is different, but at this point in it, he isn't training with his left hand. So that they're potentially pulling things from further out. Since George R. R. Martin wrote this, he knows where it's going, and he's like, okay, well, we'll bring this in earlier and establish it. Or the showrunners are like, hey, we want to get this done earlier, so now let's get this started because we need a way to keep Jaime interesting through the thing. It makes me curious because you told me how kind of like where Tyrion and Jaime's storyline go in A Storm of Swords. So I'm interested to see the difference with him being a sword fighter now, whereas from your inferences, he's not a sword fighter really at all by the end of A Storm of Swords. So it's interesting to see where it'll go from there. But they are pulling stuff from Feast. Yeah.
They are pulling stuff from Feast.
Yeah, definitely.
And Dance.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. I'm 100% for it. I think it's awesome. Good decision. We don't know. Like, I don't know. Maybe it was George R. R. Martin's decision. Maybe it was a showrunner's decision. Or maybe it was something they both agreed on was like a really good idea. Either way, I like it. It's really, it's fun. Fan favorite Bran and Jaime. Again, my Bran, long, dark, black hair, clean-shaven face. Sam, kind of quiet guy.
Not like this one who's drinking all the time. There's a line in. I just watched Sanjuro recently, and at the end of the movie, have you seen Sanjuro?
No.
Okay, we'll watch it sometime, and I'll point it out.
You did give me Hidden Fortress though, which I still haven't seen, but I really want to.
Did I get that for you?
You might not have gotten it for me, but it's here at the house.
Oh, is it an old DVD?
It here.
It's an old DVD, right?
I think it's a DVD.
Yeah.
You're like, that's where my DVD's missing.
No. I have it on Blu-ray. Anyway, we're going too far off topic. All right, so the other thing, and this is kind of something that I'm interested in.
Yes.
Well, so after overhearing Cersei and Tywin discussing Shae, where Tywin is like, so he does, Tyrion does have his whore or whatever. Tyrion orders Bronn to escort Shae to the boat to sail for Essos, but she refuses to leave Tyrion, and then Tyrion goes full I don't love you and I never loved you, blah blah blah, to try and force her to leave.
Right.
And I think at the end of that, yeah, that's right. At the end of that, he confirms with Bronn that she's left.
Yeah, she's on the ship out. Yeah. I thought I had an idea of where that's going and how they can link it up together.
Okay. What do you think is going to happen?
We're going to have to wait.
Or no, just hold on to it.
I'll hold on to it, yeah. I had a theory, and I was like, oh, there's my theory, and then I, of course, didn't write it down. But it'll come back to me.
Well, we'll get it. We have plenty of things to theorize about.
Yes, we do.
My theory was almost... I think my theory, and I texted it to you, but I think my theory was right and wrong at the same time. So, Joffrey and Margarine are getting married. Add some margarine to your Joffrey's coffee. So apparently, in the most significant difference in this was that Joffrey and Tyrion had a couple of scenes together that were cut, where Joffrey is presented the Valyrian steel sword, and he says, "I'm no stranger to Valyrian steel," and Tyrion realizes that...
Yes. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Realizes that because... basically Joffrey was the one who hired the person to kill Bran after Bran was pushed out of the window.
That's right.
And this was cut from the show. So the exchange between Tyrion and Joffrey when they're really prickly towards each other is more of just all right, same old. Whereas I guess apparently in the original draft of the show, when the thing happens at the end of the episode, it implicates Tyrion with more resolve because he has more of a reason to do what he did. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Joffrey and Margarine are married, and they go
Wonderful ceremony.
What?
Wonderful ceremony. But let's be honest. Everybody loves to go to the weddings, but everybody hates the ceremony. They just want to party. So thankfully the ceremony was short. This was our third wedding, fourth wedding.
The way the ceremony itself was shot, third, I think. The way it was shot, I thought was really good because they showed, Joffrey being a little jerk to Tyrion a couple times.
Yes.
But then they framed it so that either out of focus or rack focused to a character who had an agenda and who didn't like Joffrey. So I think you see Toblerone there, and then they would rack focus, and you see Sansa looking depressed, and you'd rack focus and see all of these things. Tyrion, they would rack focus too. You'd rack focus and see Tywin and stuff like that. So I thought that was very good for me being such a hater. I thought that was really good.
Before the wedding occurs in the books, that's when Joffrey gets his gifts.
Okay.
And he gets it later in the episode, but I think this is a good time to put this in there. So he gets the he gets the book. Oh, I forgot the name of it, but it's the histories and things of the history of the kings of blah blah blah. And there's only 4 around. And then Joffrey's like, "Oh great, a book." And then it's like anytime you get a little kid "Oh, here, look, kid, a textbook." And the kid looks at it and is just like...
That's right. That's what Tyrion got him in the show.
Yeah, that's what Tyrion got him in the show. Same in the books. And then all of a sudden, super cool, awesome grandpa gives you a sword or like a BB gun. You're like, yeah, you know, like forget this dumb book. I'm never gonna read it. But no, Joffrey has to go one step further and hack the book with his sword. And in the books, that's when Tyrion walks up and says, "Oh, I'm sorry. Would you have preferred to have a Valyrian steel knife with a dragon bone dagger?" And then Joffrey like is totally stunned. Like, wait, what? I don't know. Like, no, like, whatever. Get out of here, kind of thing. And then on the way back, Tyrion's walking with Sansa, and Tyrion's like, "Why didn't I see it before? How did I not see it before? It was Joffrey." And I think we should definitely go into this, but I wanted to throw this in there too, because there's a perfect Sansa moment in the books where he goes, "So, my lady wife, would you like to go to Casterly Rock?" She's like, "Oh, if it pleases my lord," you know, and she just gives him like such a cold shoulder. Like, "I think you would like it. Would you really like to see it?" "I will do it if it pleases my lord." And just like Tyrion's just like, "Oh my God, like this is like oh, she wants to go see. Oh wait, she wants to go see because I'm telling her to do it." Like,
right.
And it's like, God, like kills you. By the way, I think Sansa is written perfectly in this episode because she didn't. I sound terrible whenever I say this, but the way I believed it was Sansa was just, you know, quiet. She was there. She was just taking everything, but just very quiet. Just like in this episode, she didn't say much, but Sophie Turner did such a great job with the emotion and expressions on her face to just basically tell you everything that she's feeling and emoting without really doing it. And that's how I think Sansa's character should be, right? I mean, we've talked about it.
Yeah.
But
well,
I
also,
yeah.
I also like how they show that like slowly they are starting to connect, even if they know that it'll never be great. Like at the, you know, going non-linearly after Tyrion picks up Joffrey's cup and Joffrey's humiliating him, like Sansa and Tyrion work together, and it's like, okay, this is nice. And like, you know, like if things had gone differently, Sansa might not have immediately run away, but it was in her own best interest. Like she could have potentially helped to support Tyrion, even though she would have been implicated and probably died based off of what happens. What were you gonna ask me?
Yeah. You know, I don't know. I'm a purist in regards of where it felt like it should have been no rapport. Just she's completely just hates the whole relationship. Just never wants anything to do with it. But that's her life, and so she's just resigned to it. So.
Well, I think it's hard because like I think Peter Dinklage is so sympathetic or so empathetic in the show, and he's so charming that it's like as a viewer you'd be like, okay, but because, you know, like the viewer has information that the characters in the show shouldn't have,
right?
But based off of their interactions, it's like, okay, but we can tell he's not one of the bad people in the world.
Yes.
So why can't she just tell? And it's like she can't tell because in their, you know, for a variety of reasons, but the information that they always show us is Tyrion being nice. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense to me that she would kind of help him where possible, but also Tyrion is very sympathetic towards her as well, and stuff like that. Sorry. So at the wedding, Loras and Jaime confront each other, and Jaime gets all, "If you touch my sister, I will kill you." And Loras is like, "You like to have sex with your sister, so you're weird." By the way, I know I talked before about like we never see Loras do anything that like proves that he's a really good fighter. But after watching this episode, I really wanted to watch the next episode, but I couldn't because we're trying to space him out. So instead I watched Blackwater, and Loras is the one who turns the tide in Blackwater. He's the knight that comes in and kicks butt everywhere. And he looks so awesome because he's got his helmet on, and he's got like a really cool cloak, and he starts chopping everyone down.
That was at the end, that was probably Renly's cloak. It's probably Renly's.
Yeah, it might have been. I should go back and check. But he walks. He's the one who leads the charge in, and Cersei sees him with Tommen, and that's when he pulls off his hood, and you see that it's Loras. And I was like, oh my god! So, as much as bad as I rag on Loras for not being like a good fighter, they actually do have a scene in the show where he is awesome. So
yeah.
So
Sir
Loras,
Loras.
he's got his own demons, but he was awesome in that scene.
He's 15, well 16, I think. Yeah, he's like 16 because Jaime was the youngest Kingsguard, youngest member of the Kingsguard ever at 15. And Loras is quite young, but maybe he's 17 when he became Kingsguard. But that's A, how good Jaime was, and B, how much the Mad King Aerys wanted to tie the Lannisters to him. Or rather, keep the Lannisters from doing anything betraying like, because he has his pride and joy right there.
Right.
I wanted to go a little bit into the whole, let's look back to season 1 when somebody was trying to kill Bran. Again,
yes, yeah.
That was like a big deal, right? That's why Caitlyn confronted Tyrion and took him to Lysa in the first place and all, and that's where he met Bronn for the first time. And and the books tied it together. That's why, like, when I was reading it, and I remember you and I were having discussion where it's like, oh yeah, this is kind of where things are gonna end. Like I was telling you, like this feels like we're wrapping up like everything, like from book 1 until here, like everything's suddenly getting wrapped up. Like all these questions that we had from the beginning are suddenly being answered, and very consistently. Now, if you're just watching the show, you're going to go back to season 1 and be like, oh yeah, there was that thing about the dagger. Yeah, who hired that assassin in the first place? Like, oh, but wait, then the awesomeness of season 2 and season 3 and season 4 are happening, and then you forget all about it. And it's like, but if you watch it again, you're just like, oh well, I guess we'll never know. No, we know. We know.
I don't know if they come back to it in the show, but I remember I spoke to my wife about it, and she was like, I thought Cersei ordered it. And I was like, yeah, that's what I thought too until I read this thing. But why did Joffrey order it? Why did Joffrey order the hit?
The reason is because it is revealed later. And I actually... because like I knew, but then I forgot that they didn't tell it in the show. I just figured, oh, everybody knows that. Like, oh wait, no, not everybody does. And then in the chapter summaries, it did allude to this. Joffrey wanted to do it to impress his father, because the king, King
right.
Robert, because he overheard King Robert say, "Oh, Bran, he's hurt and he'll be a cripple. You should just have him dead. You should just let him die." And Joffrey's like, okay, like I can do that. Like I'll do it. I'll do what you say, Father. Like if you think that's better, then I'll go ahead and try to make that happen. So it was.
That's
Joffrey.
really interesting.
Yeah. So that was the motivation behind it, and
such a weird motivation, though.
Yeah. But then you think back to that episode when Caitlyn fights off the assassin, and you're like, really, what happened? Like, if you just watch the show, you're like, wait, what happened? Like, they burned part of Winterfell, and everybody's over there. It was like something planned. And now you're thinking, like, well, like, what's going on about that? And if they really wanted to kill Bran, why didn't they hire a faceless man? So, anyways... By the way, if it was a faceless man, the faceless man would have killed them both.
Yeah, well, like, especially at this point, right? Like, so it makes sense that Bran ordered it, because, like you just said, if it were...
ordered it.
Or Joffrey, yeah, it makes sense.
Bran ordered his own death?
No, Bran, what are you doing? No. But it makes sense that Joffrey ordered it, because Joffrey wouldn't know who to get to kill the person. Mm-hmm. And now all of these... that's a good point. I didn't think about that. But again, if you're making the show and you're not sure what elements you're going to pull from, even though you say you've read all the books,
Yeah, book 5 was out when they started
Actually,
the show.
yeah. Actually, that makes me. When was that revealed? Was that revealed in A Storm of Swords, right? Because you said they wrapped everything up.
They did. Yeah, they wrapped all those threads from book 1 basically. They wrapped them all up in book 3, like all of them.
I want to say it's a missed opportunity, but we'll see if they even mention it again.
Yeah, because they might. I don't want to, just discount it entirely. I mean, yeah, you never know. Okay, but we can get to the wedding if you wish.
Yeah, let's talk about the reception, because there's a lot of repartee.
You mentioned Jamie and Loras.
Jamie and Loras, and then Cersei confronts Brienne. No, Brienne of Tarth.
Oh yeah.
Who is like, I was doing some research, and like apparently Brienne of Tarth is supposed to be really ugly.
She's very ugly. Very ugly. That's why they call her what do we call her? Brienne
the Beauty or whatever?
Brienne the Beauty. That's right. Brienne the Beauty. No, she's got buck teeth and just her hair's like super thin and she's really big. The thing I'll say to that is, like, I was reading up about this and how like she has this trait because like no one really likes her. If anyone shows her compassion, she immediately like falls in love with them, which is why she loved Renly and all these other things. And it just makes me think to myself, like, as I'm reading it, I'm like, okay, it probably makes for a compelling character, but also like, and I know Jen knows this term, but it's like she's basically a female incel type character. Aww. Man.
So like, I think there's like, there is a lot of, well, like, okay, so Game of Thrones A Song of Ice and Fire, from like what you tell me and what I've observed, is a very like, it's a very masculine series. Like, you can tell it's written by a guy.
Yes.
And some of the ways that he is able to make like some female characters is to just kind of give masculine traits or masculine personalities to women. And I think that's what he did with Brienne, where it's just like, oh, this is like the really talented but really awkward like nerdy guy who's really good at video games, but we'll just make him a woman and make the thing that she's really good at swordplay, and there you go. I might be oversimplifying it, but that's how I see her, and so it's kind of like, it's an interesting trait to just have like anyone who's compassionate to her, she falls in love with them, but it's also like, it's a little like, I don't know. It's a good thing Gwendolyn Christie is so charming in the role, is what I'll say.
She's so good.
It's a good thing Gwendolyn Christie is so charming in the role.
It is revealed in Feast for Crows, the moment where she realized that she really wanted to be one of Renly's knights. And I can't remember it.
I read about it. I think it was like... it was like in a tournament or something, and he like paid her a compliment. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what. Toblerone and Ilaria, they trade thinly veiled insults with Cersei and Tywin. I don't remember what they said, but I remember I liked it. Mm-hmm. I liked how they were like, how each person was trying to get the upper hand in that conversation.
I don't remember that conversation. What I did was I just sat back and watched, and
that's the thing. So I didn't take any notes because I just enjoyed the process of the episode.
I would have to rewatch that whole, and I would want to. I mean, I loved that scene. It was like half the episode, which is,
yeah.
I think I turned to my wife and was just like, this is what like they should do. They should spend like half an episode on one of these stories and just give it the screen and airtime that it needs. But so many of like the big players are in that scene, which is
right. That's awesome. What made it so compelling.
But it doesn't make sense that Brienne was there. It makes no sense that Brienne was actually at the wedding at all. Like, there's no reason why she would be there. I mean, there really isn't. Except Jaime invited her, but I don't know if he did. Like, why would she be there? She's not a knight. She's a woman She's not with anybody. That basically means that you're not really a part of the noble class of Westeros. And this is the king's royal feast, like, for his wedding. They don't just invite, like, nobody to go there. Why is Brienne there? She shouldn't be there. But she is. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is maybe it was, like, as a guest of Jaime's. It's a good point. That's a good point. She shouldn't have been there. It's convenient.
Oh, and it makes for some great scenes. And I love that she was. But, whatever. I'm not going to... It's one of those, like, the scene was so good, I can live with it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Oh, we didn't talk about this. The person who tells Tyrion about that Shay is in danger is Varys. So this is here's another thing. Apparently, in the episode, Varys tells Tyrion in a conversation in the garden, but in the original script, it was going to be in the Red Keep's dungeon. Varys is dressed as a denizen of the dungeon in armor, carrying a whip and wearing a false beard. And yes. I think that's just a little bit too corny. Like, I think it goes too far in sort of like the goofy direction than the show is like capable of handling.
Well,
I understand if he does that in the book, but he has never done anything like that in this show. He has met people in the dungeon, so they could have kept it in the dungeon, but they might have lost that set. But him dressing up and like sneaking around, like I think they probably read it, and there's a way to do it where it's good and not corny. But I think they read it and they just thought it would be corny.
Well, Tyrion and Shay end up having sex in the book Shay, in the area where all the big dragons are kept. So I was like, oh, cool, we're going to see that room again. Yeah, no, we weren't. Okay, that's too bad. Because I wanted to see that room again. That was really cool. Second, now, if they had followed the source material a little, like, closer, which, I don't really... Okay, season 1, they followed the source material pretty close. There were some differences, but they followed it pretty close. And then they decided to follow it less close in the second season, and this is where things are starting to get weird. But in the second season, there were times where Varys would surprise Tyrion out of the blue in disguises. One of them, he was dressed like a woman. And just like oh my God, Varys, is that you? It's just like, indeed, it is. Like
in the book.
In the book.
It
was established that he was very much into disguises, and he was very, very good at it. So, the show's different. I would have liked that comedic touch. I probably would have saw it as a comedic touch and a nod to the readers where it's like, wait, that's Varys? Like, oh my God, I didn't even recognize you. Like, yes, he is the master of whisperers. So, I mean, I don't know how... I bet George R.R. Martin was getting quite prickly at all of his decisions not coming to fruition, because he probably either wanted to give the readers some like, hey, here's a little thing, like, you enjoy this, and his work coming to life. And you and I have talked about this. They seem to be taking out a lot of the character from the story. I don't mean characters, I mean the character. Like, oh my God, Varys, that's you? Vargo Hope the goat with his slobberingness. And then you've got, there's little things too, like little character sort of comedic things, and they're not really in the show. But I'm sure there was like, it got worse,
What? The show?
Their relationship.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's soured, huh?
No, I think you can tell that it gets worse because there are things like if you look at the review or if you look at the critical consensus of the next couple episodes, you can tell that he's like, I wasn't there when they decided to do these things. I wasn't there. So I'm hoping that for the new show that's coming out, he's obviously an executive producer on it, but I think he also had more of a hand in the scripting, and I'm curious to see if he's actually going to write some episodes as well. which I would be okay with. I know all the people who want the Winds of Winter to come out are super mad about it.
That's what I was gonna say.
But like he's.
You only live once, man.
Apparently, he also had Reek looking more like Reek with white hair and missing fingers. If you watch the episode, you'll notice that Reek has all 4 of his digits on his right hand back, even though Ramsay was
he
supposed
cut off
to have
one.
taken the pinky. It's back, baby. All right,
And Ricaro lives. Oh,
and
wait,
Ricaro, yeah, no.
Oh my god. You know, Zarozan Doxos lives. Oh wait, no. But he's so minor. I mean, it's not a big deal. But still, Ricaro lives. He will forever live. He's still alive in dance right now. He's still alive.
Let's go into the rest of the wedding. So
yes,
they have the fight of the kings with the dwarf performers who come out, and it's very crude and it's rude and it's insulting to everyone. But Jack Gleason, I think that's his name, the guy who plays as Joffrey, is so good in that scene.
So good.
He's like laughing so hard he's spitting up wine. This was the moment that I was like when that happened, I was like, wait a second. I know Joffrey dies. Is he gonna die in this episode? Like, I felt something happening, and I was like, oh, I wonder.
Oh yeah, because I think I told you that he does.
Well, and I knew that he died at some point, but I wasn't sure when. So they have this like really insulting play where they include, I think they have like the Renly guy have a little butt thing that shows up, and they put a little wolf's head on the wolf, the young wolf, the young king, on basically on the
one who's supposed to be Rob.
Yeah, and it's all done in like incredible, and they have Stannis running with his tail between his legs, and it's all in really bad taste. And then Joffrey starts insulting Tyrion, and he's like, oh, you should go in the final battle, blah blah blah. And then Tyrion makes a couple of like witty remarks because he's smarter than Joffrey. And then Joffrey belittles. Joffrey belittles Tyrion with the cup, which I mentioned earlier, where Sansa's trying to help him. And then he takes his Valyrian steel sword, and probably like the most insulting thing, where he's like cutting open the cake with his sword. Which, by the way, in that moment when Marjorie's like, cake! I'm like, oh, that's great. Timing is excellent.
Yeah, that was
so they
good
bring out the
timing.
cake, and the first thing I noticed was the only person eating the cake was Joffrey. So my first thought to you, I was like, oh, okay, he's probably going to die. He's probably going to be poisoned. And I knew that Tyrion was going to be, because we talked about this, I knew that Tyrion was going to be labeled, accused of the killing. But I was like, okay, so they're going to think it's the wine. But I bet it's the cake. So he's eating the cake, and then he drinks some wine, and then he starts choking. And then he dies. And then Cersei's all crazy, and everyone's all like, ah! My first thought was, and this will segue us into episode 3, I'm sure, but my first thought was, it's the Tyrells, because the Tyrells want Joffrey out of the way. But then in the next episode, I thought it was someone else. And then in the 4th episode, they tell me who it is, and I was like, I think one of the thoughts I had was that it might have been Tywin, because that is kind of hinted at in the next episode as well. But so Joffrey is poisoned and he dies. And that's the big twist of the episode.
Yes. I know that the showrunners were like, oh, we loved watching the Red Wedding so much, that's where everything changed. I'm kind of the opinion that when Joffrey dies, that's an extremely pivotal moment. Here's why.
Yeah.
Robb was contained. Now, if Robb had lived, he probably would have won the war. Like, he had the Blackfish running his military operations, and he had a way to get around this there's this big there's this castle where It's never been taken from the South, but Robb had this like incredibly creative plan, and he was going to take it and probably take back the North. So, but he was kind of locked up, right? And then we already know what happened to him, but like not much really changed. Now, all of a sudden, the king, who's like, everybody's like kind of calmed down now, like, all right, we got the king, Stannis is little. Robb, he was a threat, but not too much of one. Now he's really not anymore at all. Like, things are good. And now it's like, oh my god, the king's dead. Like, holy crow. Oh my gosh. Like, and how did he die? I had this one scene in mind from reading. Kind of glad they didn't have it in the show. But Meryn Trant, the Kingsguard, was standing over Joffrey with a spoon, sticking that spoon down his throat like he's choking, trying to get whatever's in there out. And I was like, oh god, like it gave me like a visceral reaction when I read that. I just went like, oh jeez. And I of course thought like, oh man, like I know Joffrey's like a terrible person, but poor kid. He's a terrible person, but he's also a lot younger in the books. Like, all the ages are like a little bit, they're a lot younger. Not a lot, but they are all younger in the books. So it's a little bit like, oh. You know?
Yeah, I wonder if that's a problem with the show where it's like, no matter what they do, the characters still end up feeling kind of caricatured and not like, because like Joffrey is just so despicable. And he's done so many despicable things that it's almost like I was happy when he was gone because it was like he was a terrible entity.
Yes.
And how are you going to get rid of him? So
Jen definitely cheered.
I think most people did. And then
I think most people did too. I did too.
It's also weird. Yeah, I mean, like and you watch the behind the episode, and they're like, yeah, and you know, Joffrey's this terrible person, but like Jack Gleason was such fun on the set, and he was so entertaining, and this and that. I'm like, so, like, from the show's point of view, it's kind of like the first seeds of victory, right? Because the reason the Red Wedding is so compelling is not necessarily for the status quo of the world. It is, but it's not. Like you were saying, you were kind of presenting the case of it not being important for the status quo of the world, because it's like, okay, Robb was contained, he was already losing a lot of momentum, and now he's dead. But for us as fans of the show, or as readers, we find it really compelling because it's like, oh my god, these people that we were rooting for and we were hoping would survive, and it wasn't just one of them, it was like two significant characters.
That you reminded me too. Thank you. He wasn't going to win back the North. He was going to take Casterly Rock.
Right. In the show, yeah, he was going to take... That's the thing. He made a lot of stupid moves. Like, if you go back and rewatch the show now, you can be like, all right... Because, like, I'm watching it, and I know he's going to die. And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's true that I'm not getting invested in his character because I know he ultimately dies. But, yeah, so, like, he was on his way out. So the real significant... And Caitlyn wasn't even a very well-established character in the show.
Right.
To me.
Probably because they knew they were going to kill her.
Well, probably because like they just don't know they didn't really know how to write her and didn't know what to do with her. And again, it's probably an adaptation problem where like, wow, all of this stuff feels really significant in the book, but it feels like we barely moved anywhere in the show. Now, obviously that's not true, but that's how I feel a lot of the time when watching the show.
Exactly.
But yeah, like I kind of agree with you because now it's just like, hey, the throne was settled. Oh, now the throne is back up in the air. Now all of those different positions that, like, all of those different people that were vying for it, now we have something new going on.
But here's where you could have...
You're right, it does shake it up.
But here's where you could have a real air of stability, is that, still, it's Tywin. Like, let's be honest, Joffrey's not running it. Tywin is. And you know what? Right. Now that it's Tommen, guess what? It's still Tywin. Like, so, even though, like, these are happening, like, but it's still Tywin, so there will still be peace.
I mean, but you could even say, like, it could potentially be worse, because Joffrey was a wild card. So even Tywin was struggling to control him, which is why I thought Tywin might have been in on the murder at first. But that's one of the reasons why I thought he might have been in on it. But
No, to
So
murder
what
your
are
own kin is like a big no-no in that world.
yeah, and if he didn't do it for Tyrion, he certainly wasn't gonna like he hates Tyrion more than he hates Joffrey. So
He does.
Do you have any last thoughts on this episode,
I've got
or any
two.
more thoughts?
I got
Okay.
two. First question I have was it Jack Gleason that sung the Reigns of Castamere at the end of the episode? Because whoever was singing sounded like really familiar. I'm like, is that the actor for Joffrey who gets his little quote unquote swan song at the end of the episode that he dies in?
I don't know. It might have been the Icelandic band Sigur Rós. Yeah, it was the Icelandic band Sigur Rós performed their rendition of the Reigns of Castamere at Joffrey's wedding and then during the end credits.
So I don't think they even should have played the Reigns of Castamere, because the Reigns of Castamere is like the Lannister victory song.
Right.
And why would they be playing that song when like a Lannister just died? But you know, because it's a sad song. They could have just held it silent, just like they did when Robb and Catelyn died. They could have just held it silent.
Or played like the triumphant. I don't know what they were going for, because like everyone is happy that Joffrey is dead. So like you would think that would be a great time to play like victory music, but it's like everyone's looking around and it's like
like the rock version of The Bear and the
bad.
Maiden Fair.
Yeah.
Not this actually wasn't my other question, but it was what the showrunner said in the inside the episode. They said that the viewer is supposed to feel very sad about this death because of the way Cersei reacted. Basically, Lena Headey's reaction, where you're watching the mother suddenly grieve for their son. Even though the son was a monster, you still feel that grievingness. And I did. I thought Lena Headey really pulled it off, and I felt like, yeah, he's like a horrible person, and yeah, he's going to die, but then you look up at Cersei, and you're like, yeah, but that's the thing about death, is that it doesn't just affect the person who's dead, it affects everybody around that person, everybody who knows them. Oh, real quick, I did want to get your opinion on the huge set pieces for the wedding. I think they said in the extras it took like 5 days to shoot. They're like, yeah, in a movie we could do this over like 2 weeks, but for a television show we had like 5 days, and then in the books it's supposed to be a 77 course meal for the 7 gods.
Of course it is.
Yeah. And of course there's like pages and pages and pages like devoted to like all the different foods and things that are coming out. Sansa doesn't eat anything at the wedding because she's just too like, yes my lord, sure my lord,
Right.
you know? But yeah, 77 courses, and then the tables and the setting. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
No, I thought it was awesome, but also like, okay, this is where I'm gonna sound like a terrible person. Yeah, I get that it's. Yeah, I know that it's on a budget, and they're on a time schedule that's insane, and they can only shoot the stuff. And yes, Alex Graves did a great job of capturing everything that he needed. Probably not as efficiently as he could have, just because of the way that modern productions work, where you're usually shooting from 2 cameras and you're trying to get as much coverage as possible so you can refine the pacing of it in the edit instead of refining the pacing of it during the episode, like during the shooting, I should say. It's just the modern way that television and movies are made, where they don't care as much about how, like, they don't give as much thought to like how it should be paced in the moment, which like it's a bigger debate that I love having, and I come on and I just Alex Graves did a great job. It was a good choice to have him, because you wanted someone who was very accustomed to shooting very efficiently and who knew what they needed to capture. I felt like it was great. But if I had to think really hard about it, I wish that they lingered on more of the amazing stuff. Now, with that said, they had the giant dragon head that everyone ran out of, or the lion's head that everyone ran out of, which was great. I think sometimes though, if you devote too much thought to a thing, then you notice like, wow, the whole like seating section it seemed smaller than the seating section that was at my wedding, you know? It's like, if this is supposed to be such a huge wedding, then it should be the size of Central Park, not, you know, a little bit bigger than sort of like a normal wedding that people are having now. So again, it's like those little things. Now, again, with that said, the production design was amazing. I loved watching that behind the scenes thing where they're talking about putting the food together, and staging it all correctly, and the choice of colors that they used. I did love that. So I thought that as a set piece, it was pretty cool. And again, they make it sound like they only used it for this episode, but it goes into the next episode as well. Nice. Not very much into the next episode, but
that's cool. My final thoughts is that actually Jamie isn't there.
In the book?
Yeah. So, and it actually takes place in the Red Keep, in the Great Hall in the Red Keep, instead of this like really nice outdoor kind of, outdoor festivities. No, it takes place in the Red Keep in the Great Hall, or the Great Feast Hall. Don't quote me on that. I'm just assuming. But it's got to be this huge thing. So it's got to be in like the biggest, not the biggest castle because that's Harrenhal, but oh god, Harrenhal. But it's in the Red Keep. But yeah, Jamie didn't get there in time. Jamie doesn't arrive in King's Landing until after the until after the wedding.
Okay.
So he definitely is in there when Joffrey is lying inside the sept, but he's not there during the wedding. So kind of interesting take on things. So I approve. I'm good with it. Like, it doesn't bother me.
Okay. Yeah, it would change everything if he wasn't there, because he wouldn't have even appeared in the last 3 episodes.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
It would have been pretty interesting change. Mm-hmm. But D.B. Weiss and David Benioff make these choices, and then, you know, in the case of the 4 episodes that George R.R. Martin wrote, he has to write around it. So
yeah,
that's the other interesting thing is he can introduce these things, and then D.B. Weiss and David Benioff are forced to use them suddenly, which I kind of think is fun, because it's almost
fun too.
It's almost like a series of one-upsmanship.
Yes, just thinking that. That's interesting.
Should we move on to episode 3?
Let's do it.
All right. I really don't have a lot to say about this, but since we started in King's Landing, let's just stay in King's Landing and
let's do it.
So,
I
Dawn,
did write down my theory. Oh, good.
What?
I did write down my theory about Shay.
Okay.
Oh, thank God.
Okay, so in the Narrow Sea, they say in the Narrow Sea, but it actually takes place at the edge of King's Landing. Dantos and Sansa flee, and then you find out that, oh God. Okay, I hate Middlefinger. I don't hate him because he's such a cold and calculated person who outmaneuvers everyone.
You don't like the way he's portrayed.
I don't like the way he's portrayed, and I find him really annoying. And every time he opens his mouth, I'm sorry, actor who plays as Middlefinger, your take on him is just so it's like he wants to be Jafar from Aladdin, but he just fails so hard at it.
I loved Middlefinger this entire season until he showed up.
Yeah.
So I
loved it when he was
here. Okay, I know who should have played Middlefinger. You ready for this one?
Sure.
Johnny Depp. And here's why. Because in the books, he is barely around. You can have somebody Epic just pop in for a scene or two and then leave. And then all the characters talk about it. That's what I think should have been done. None of this oh man, one of the hallmarks of the show are these Varys and Middlefinger conversation. Oh, everybody, look at this great conversation. They don't talk. Are you kidding? No way. If one of them talks to the other, they're going to get information. And
yeah.
Not only are they, if I'm Varys and you're Middlefinger, if I talk, you're going to get in, if you talk, yeah, I'm going to get information. But if I say anything, you're going to get information, and I don't want that.
Yeah.
I actually think that Varys and Middlefinger never talk to each other. I think that is the truth. but this is television. And they need to convey information to the viewer.
So I would actually I wouldn't go as far as casting like a really well-known person. I probably would cast someone who's like a Stanley Tucci. Not Stanley Tucci, but like someone who is well-known enough, but also is a chameleon. Because you want to not realize that this character is significant.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So you want to cast the chameleon in that role. But he killed it's just frustrating because he's so annoying. He kills Dantos because he's like, Dantos is a drunk, and that necklace you got, I made it to your I didn't make it that long ago, and then I gave it to him so he could give it to you and convince you to come on the ship. And I'm like, this was so rushed. Like, now, that's all I was thinking the whole time. I was just thinking this was so rushed. By the way, this episode written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. So if it feels like it's just a bunch of pawns on a chessboard being moved one at a time, it's because it is.
That's probably what they want. They're like, oh, see, that was what we were going for this whole time. Okay, couple words about Littlefinger is that
yes.
Yeah, he barely shows up in the books, but his hand is in like everything, or his little middle fingers are in everything, which is kind of the way it's supposed to be. That's why, like, what to your point, the chameleon actor would be really good. Now, when Dantos is meeting with Sansa in books 2 and 3, like this happens over 2 books with Sansa, not just 1, but 2. Like it's
right.
That's why Storm of Swords like wraps up everything. And especially this. Dantos isn't acting alone. He does say, I have my benefactor. Me and my benefactor, yeah, we're together on this. We want to get you out. So you know it's not just Dantos who's trying to get her out. You know it's Dantos and Dantos' benefactor who's trying to get her out. So the reader's like, who's Dantos really working for here? And then when Dantos gives her the thing, you're like, oh, okay, whatever. And then it like makes a whole lot more sense. Like, yeah, it was Middlefinger that did this. Now, to be fair, they don't really go into detail about why Middlefinger did this. They really don't. And so it may not even be clear that Joffrey was the target. Like it's just you just don't know.
Well, we don't know that in this episode anyway. That Middlefinger even had a hand in it.
Oh, you're right. That's right, because he like smashes the thing and like throws it on Dantos.
And tosses it, yeah. Yeah, so we don't even know that that's happened yet. That's all that happens in this episode with Sansa and Middlefinger.
Yep.
They didn't even need this in this episode. Well, I guess they did to like show that Sansa has left.
That's true.
So, okay, it's a tease. All right, that's fine. All right, and then Cersei accuses Tyrion of killing Joffrey, and Tyrion is arrested. And then Joffrey has a funeral where...
Oh, yes. Why did the gods make me love such a hateful woman?
And then he does an unspeakable act to Cersei, which apparently the writers didn't think it was.
That's because it happens a little bit differently in the books.
Yes. I think this is one of the things that George R. R. Martin commented on, where he's like, it's different in the book, because in the book she ultimately consents. She eventually consents to it.
She not only does she feebly fights. So she's like, no, like she doesn't go against the action. The thing that she's going against is the action in that location. So it's the location that makes her not want it. But so this is when Jaime comes. He comes when Joffrey's dead. And this is like, he first gets to King's Landing and he's first like, I gotta go see Cersei. Like, this has been the reason why I've been trying to get home. She is the reason why I've been trying to be there. I don't know what's going to be revealed, but she is the reason why I became a Kingsguard, to be around her. Like, that's it. Like, my sole focus, my motivation. So he goes to her, and he looks at Joffrey, who's dead, and he didn't really know him. Like, he's just, like, it's just Joffrey. Like, doesn't really feel like a father at all. So he feels conflicted that he feels like he should feel more about this than he really does. And that in itself makes him, he's a very complicated character. And I think, we talked about this last time, George R.R. Martin, I think, wanted to have, like, an incredible literary character, one that's, like, extremely complicated but motivated and clear and understandable, where, like, you look at his actions and you're like, what is this guy doing? And then you learn about from his perspective and you're like, oh my god, this guy's a heart of gold, incredible person, just in a bad situation, who feels these things and he can't help it, and you feel bad for him, but like this, like, he is like such a roller coaster in Storm of Swords. He is like,
right.
Oh my gosh, so misunderstood. And so he gets back to Cersei, and yeah, like they do have sex in the Sept, and she feebly fights, but then again, not at the last minute she consents. She consents way earlier than the last minute, and as soon as it's over, she's like, okay, like you can't, like, stop reveling in this. We can't do this anymore. Blah blah blah. Blah. You know, like, just all of a sudden, just like Cersei gives into her passions, and then immediately is just like, okay, that was terrible. We shouldn't have done it. Like, oh, it was terrible. And also in the books, Cersei is not the mother-loving figure that the way the showrunners present her in the show. She's not that. But maybe she changes after Joffrey's death. Probably, but I don't know. She's very...
Well,
I'm glad I got that out of my system. But yeah, that bothered me a little bit.
There's, I mean, like, on the Wikipedia article, there's literally a subsection that's just called in critical reception about the Sept scene.
Really?
Where they talk about how, like, multiple critics are like, so Jaime rapes her. And the showrunners are like, well, no, she doesn't. And George R. R. Martin's like, well, no, she consents in the book. Mm-hmm. And the actors are like, well, no, it is, but it's not. And Lena Headey just refuses to say that if it is one way or another.
Wait, who refuses to say?
Lena Headey refused to determine it. But it's also a weird thing because, like, a lot of them mention how, like, this happens in the show and then is, like, never mentioned again. And so all of this redemption stuff with Jaime, like, comes to a halt. This thing happens. It makes him, like, irredeemable. And then they just kind of go on pretending like it didn't happen in the rest of the show.
Wow.
So, like...
Wow. Wait, who wrote the episode? Yeah, I know it wasn't Brian Cogman.
In this episode, it was D.B. Weiss and David Benioff.
Yeah, that's right. You said...
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? In my opinion, I think this was a failure of communication.
Oh, yeah. I think they could have done it differently, but again, like I said, like, as good as Alex Graves does, like, as solid of a job that he does, clearly he's not prepping it as well as he should be, because, like, this should have been a huge red flag, and especially now watching it, it's a giant red flag. Like, like, I don't know, maybe our sympathetic character, like, our complex sympathetic character, I don't know, it just reads, it's hard to read now, because it's just like, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, compared to some of the other horrors that other characters have done, this isn't as bad because they've already had a history to get. I don't know. It's just, here's what I think it is. I think it was the showrunners wrote it, and they had a vision in mind for what they wrote based off the source material, and the director saw it, and he interpreted it differently, and that's what was portrayed. And I don't think it was a prepping error on the director's part. I honestly think it was a miscommunication on sides. Or maybe the showrunners wanted it that way. Because earlier in the show, Cersei looked at Jaime and said, everything's changed. Like, no. Like, he would advance on her. And she would be like, no, everything's changed. Everything's changed. And it's like, what's changed? Like, I don't know. Do you remember that? I remember that very clearly. Because I'm like, if Jaime wanted his moment, if Jaime and Cersei wanted their moment, that was their moment. That's why I was like, oh, this is very different than the books. And then they didn't have their moment then. And Cersei was like, everything's changed. So maybe everything has changed. But again, from what you told me, like, that makes a lot of sense, because Jaime has been built up to be this like person who it's not even as powerful in the show as it was in the books, because he lost his hand. He basically reevaluated his entire life, found a courage to jump in there without a hand to save Brienne, and just he turned into the knight of the stories, like the stories that Sansa hears about all these beautiful knights and their heroic deeds. Jaime was not that. Then he lost his hand. What makes a knight, right? He loses his ability to fight. And then he becomes the hero from the stories. And that's his story. And that's what I loved about this book. That's why I love Jaime's story arc, is because he became the hero of the stories, and he can't even do it without his sword hand. Like, that's awesome. And then, you know, he was very redeemable, and this was a consentful act.
It was different in the book.
It was different.
So, like, here's one thing you could do. You can have her say, "No, we shouldn't. No, we shouldn't. No, not in front of Joffrey. No, not here." And then say, "Oh," and then like, and the part where she consents is like, you could have done it differently that still had the same effect and been a little less rapey. It's very that's the thing, is it's very easy to change it. It's very easy. So I agree with you. I think it's a breakdown in communication. And it also sets a bad precedent, because there's already a lot of difficulty talking and dealing with rape and things like that. And for the show to kind of like have a scene like that in a character that is supposed to be coming into his own and the audience is supposed to start liking.
Oh, with his sister.
And then,
don't forget that.
With his sister. And then to not really address it in any way going forward, from what I've heard, or to think that it was just okay. I think, you know, it's bad for Ball. So I just think it's bad for Ball.
Oh. Well, obviously it's a very different thing from the books, so I'm going to just kind of watch to see how they're going to develop it in the show. It's already like a very big diversion for me. So we'll see how it develops in the show versus how it develops in the books.
Let's move on with King's Landing.
Sure.
Tywin and Oberyn and Toblerone talk about how Tywin thinks Toblerone killed Joffrey, and Toblerone thinks that Tywin ordered the Mountain to kill his sister. And then Tywin offers to have the Mountain and Toblerone meet as long as Toblerone is one of the judges on the trial for Tyrion. So that actually interested me, because I think the judges are what? Tywin and Cersei and now Toblerone, right? So that'll be interesting. Here's what I think. As a lawyer once said, never ask a question you don't know the answer to. Never put someone on there that you're not sure how they're gonna vote.
Wise words.
And then Podrick visits Tyrion in his cell, and it's very emotional. Tyrion asks Podrick to bring Jaime, and Podrick turned down an offer to betray Tyrion, and Tyrion said that you need to betray me because he doesn't want Podrick to get killed on behalf of him. And it's a very powerful and emotional scene, and Podrick is great, and I love him, and I hope he doesn't die.
I love Pod.
I know, me too. It's such a great dynamic and relationship, and
he's
in the books, actor
he runs away. He runs, and he's like 10 in the books. He's 10. Mm-hmm. He's a boy.
So the show,
he's a squire.
So the show is just like a new character.
It's a new character, but okay. It's okay. It's okay. Like I'm kind of going along with it.
Did Podrick kill the dude in the Battle of Blackwater to save
does.
Tyrion in the book as well?
Yes.
Okay.
But he's still a boy and he does it. Yeah.
I think they just like the actor, and the actor's so like sympathetic that they keep wanting to put him in, because that's something that happens in the next episode, and I'm like, hey, it's like the biggest fan service they could have. And then I read that doesn't happen in the books, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So we'll get to that.
We will.
Anything else you want to say about King's Landing?
I love this scene with the goodbye to Pod. That was like,
yeah,
well done. I liked it how Tywin and Oberyn were talking about. Sorry, Tywin and Toblerone were talking about poison, because Toblerone is the Red Viper, and he actually specializes in poisons. So he is kind of a suspect without like being a suspect, but you know, they don't like Lannisters very much, but he basically it's the Mountain. Like Toblerone wants justice for his sister. Like that's his most driving thing right now. Yeah, it was awkward at the wedding. Yeah, in the show, it was very awkward.
All right, so in the North, I couldn't care less.
Wow.
I know, it's terrible, but this is, I honestly, like, I think I was checking my phone the entire time. The scene with Sam and Gilly, where it's like, Sam is worried that, Sam is worried for Gilly, and so he takes her to Moletown, and I was just like, I don't care about this. I'm sure it's important. These are really long scenes. This location looks terrible. This seems like a horrible idea. Then the wildlings raid a village and force a young boy to run to Castle Black and tell the Night Watch what they've done. I don't care about this scene. This scene is horrible. The cannibals are terrible. Like,
not all cannibals are bad. Just saying. And
then at Castle Black, they find out that the mutineers have taken over Castle Black, and Jon is nervous because he told Mance Rayder that there were 1,000 soldiers, but really there's only like a couple hundred. And so now he says we have to attack Craster's Keep and kill the mutineers. One, because they're mutineers, but two, because they could betray them.
Right. Yeah, clearly a big divergence here from the books. So Sam and Gilly, I forgot about this, but Sam and Gilly, as they're traveling back towards the wall, they get attacked. I don't know if I told you, but they get attacked by a bunch of whites. Not the other, but they get attacked by whites.
Right, the whites, which are the undead.
Right. And Sam actually uses his dragon bone dagger on them. Or not dragon bone, I'm sorry, his obsidian dagger.
Obsidian.
And it doesn't work. It doesn't work on the whites.
Okay.
It worked on the other, but it didn't work on the whites, which is kind of interesting to me. And then there was like 100 of them. They were getting to them. And that's when Cold Hands showed up, because there were all these ravens that just flew down, like just hundreds and hundreds of ravens just flying down, attacking all of the whites and all the undead. And then that's when you see Cold Hands, and he's like, go, get away from here. And then he rides with them on his giant elk. Like, is it like a crazy character? He's like, maybe he's like Tom Bombadil, and they had to leave him out from Lord of the Rings, and they're leaving him out of this. But he plays a pretty big role. But they're getting around it by having Bran have that vision on the wall, or on the tree, of like, I know where we need to go. Cold Hands and Jojen were the ones who were leading him to where he needed to go. But Cold Hands is not around. Oh, I like Cold Hands. Oh well. I did like the mention about Hobb, Three-Fingered Hobb with his famous stew at Castle Black. Shout out to readers of the books. And yeah, I didn't really care too much either about it. That's all I have to say.
That's terrible. Like, to me, that's awful. Anyway, at Dragonstone, Davos learns that Joffrey is dead, and suggests that they go across the Narrow Sea and buy the soldiers who Daenerys' army has already killed. And then, explain this to me, because I do remember this, but I also don't remember this. So Davos has Shireen write a message to the Iron Bank of Oh, that's right. He wants to hire people from Braavos to help him, and Stannis rebuild their army because Stannis doesn't have an army anymore.
That's a divergence from the book, I believe. I don't believe that was ever really a message. But I was glad to see the painted table again. Did you notice it in there? Yeah. Love that. I love that table. So they should just have like the whole episode in that. I love that room.
Dragonstone's a fun location. I like it when they're at Dragonstone.
Me too. I forgot what they were gonna do, but here's where I'm having a hiccup. Is that at the end of season 3, didn't Stannis say that they're going north? But they're still at Dragonstone. I thought they had already left for the north.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that's the other weird thing is, like, I understand that some of this is to kind of preserve continuity, but, like, so Joffrey died in the last episode. And Tyrion's trial is probably not for another, like it doesn't happen in this episode. Because I guess they have to establish, like, okay, he's captured.
It's like,
but it also doesn't happen next episode. And It's probably not going to happen in episode 5. I think it starts in like episode 6, and things happen at a much slower pace than I feel like another show would have them happen. Mm-hmm. So maybe they're still getting their provisions, except at the end of season 1, they decide to go beyond the wall. Even though they could have had a nice scene at the start of season 2 of Sam and Jon getting all of their provisions together, because that's the pace of the show, which is inconsistent. All right, fine, whatever.
You do get to see that room. I think it was in the next episode where you see Sam and Jon in a room with the study and all. And I was like, hey, there it is. Why weren't they in that room earlier in season 2 getting ready to go beyond the wall? Oh.
This isn't the episode where Jon is, like, training the guys, right? That's next episode?
That's the next one, yeah.
Yeah, that's the next episode. Yes. Man, forget Beyond the North in this episode.
The only... Right. I'm good with Dragonstone, if you are.
Riverlands?
Yeah, I have here. It's The Hound and Arya. Fair work for fair wage. Good punch! And that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I didn't care about this part of the story at all. I honestly, I really didn't like this episode.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
Oh, wait, no, there's only one thing I liked in this episode.
Was that Daria?
Yes.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, but this should have been in... How did episode...
There's only... sorry, there is one more thing from the north. And that I like that Janos and Alistair team up in the show. Or Janos and Alistair team up. And then Master Aemon speaks up. Like, yeah, Master Aemon speaks up for Jon Snow. No, for Jon Snow.
That was in the first episode.
Dang. Oh, well.
Yeah.
Let's go then to... Let's go to Danyland. I'm just going to call Essos Danyland.
Okay, that's right. I had forgotten that episode 1 ends with the Hound and Arya and stuff, so they wouldn't have been able to do this. Okay, so wait, I'm getting out. Where are we? Breaker of Chains. All right, so then Daenerys gets to the big wall, and they bring a champion out who pees on the floor, and it's really disrespectful.
Totally
and
like
she
the
needs
books.
to find
Exactly.
a champion. What?
Exactly like the books. The champion. He was just such a jerk, and he taunted. So it was just terrible. He peed and was just like, har har har.
That's why this is why I like this Dario, because like I'm like, all right, I hope Dario fights him. But it's like it goes around to every pro. Grey Worm offers to be the champion, and then
No, Gray Fox.
and then no, my favorite coffee maker, Barista Sell Me, tries.
No, Barista Sell Me.
No, Barista Sell Me. When you're finally like, hey, maybe Barista Sell Me gets
Sell
to do
me on
something.
some coffee. Sell me on some coffee.
Hey, sell me on a fight scene. No fight scene for him. He's too valuable.
I was so sad. I wanted to see him fight again. He's awesome.
I know. Jorah Mormont.
Watching old people just
Khaleesi.
like rocket is so cool.
You mean watching old people stunt doubles rocket?
Exactly.
Jorah Mormont seems like the natural choice because like he's literally her captain. No problematic, unproblematic character, Jorah Mormont.
Yeah, and Dario is like the head of the sellsword company. So like if he dies, who's commanding the sellswords?
But he's also a cocky little you-know-what, so I'm fine with it.
And if all the sellswords are like, hey, our captain like didn't want to fight this guy, like, no, it had to have been Dario. That was awesome.
It was great. I love like this scene is this episode. I could just like not watch ever again, except for
this
that scene, because what he takes out his sword, and I was like, because I was watching it with my wife, and I was like, oh, I bet he's gonna kill the horse, and then he killed the horse because it's a smart thing to do, and then he killed the champion, and I was like, this is awesome, and then he was like a 12-year-old boy and peed on the champion, and I was like, yeah. Natural. That's so I thought that was awesome. And then she like throws the catapults with chains, and like that one actor who's in Cruella and like a bunch of other things, and he always plays the bumbling idiot. He was like front and center for most of those scenes, and I was just like, okay, maybe this guy will be significant, but he wasn't in the next episode, so
yeah, so he wasn't. But Cruella came out recently, and this might have been his big break. That one.
It might have been. It might have been.
I've got somebody in there who kind of had a little afro, and he reminded me of Bruce Lee's partner in Enter the Dragon. So, I mean, you'll never see him again because he was probably like an extra, but he totally reminded me of that guy. He's like the boxer guy from Enter the Dragon.
Okay.
No worries.
Yeah. What do you have to say about Marine?
This was a good diversion from the books, for sure. But they're also setting up Dario to be very different than the character from the books. So, we'll see. The character Dario is more like the actor who played him last season.
Creepy.
So, a little creepy, yeah. Like, kind of dangerous. Like, creepy in like a dangerous sense, not like a sense. But
like creepy in a dangerous sense, as in like you don't know what he's going to do, good or bad, or like because like this one it feels a little carefree, which I'm fine. Like I said, he's like a scoundrel type character. He's a little bit more carefree. He's a little bit Flynn Ridery, a little bit Nathan Drakey.
Not
Is that
quite,
what you mean?
Not quite the character.
So what do you mean by creepy dangerous? Like a serial killer creepy dangerous?
Yes.
Or what we perceive to be serial killer? Okay.
Yes. Anyways. But yeah, it was a good diversion. Because in the books it was, no, strong Belwas. And that was like his big scene. He hasn't even showed up at all in Dance with Dragons yet. But, yeah, Arston was the squire for Strong Belwas, who ended up being Sir Barristan Selmy. So it was like, okay, like, and when I was watching it too, I was like, yeah, this was like I could see where they were going in the show, and I was like, good direction. Approval.
Establishing Dario as like a closer, and like also like a little flirty relationship with Daenerys.
Yes, and that he fought this. He did this big fight, and that was really good.
Yeah. That's one of the things is like I appreciate all of the characters in the book, but Like,
yes,
I talking with you about To Kill a Mockingbird in the movie, how they reduce a lot of the character roles and you realize how many characters are superfluous.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if as much as you can, if you can, like, streamline them. And again, if you didn't have Dario at this point to do the role, then it is a good chance to establish how lethal a fighter Barristan Selmy is again. Because you already had it when he killed the one magic user.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the warlock.
It still does seem like it. Like Barristan Selmy and Jorah Mormont literally feel like the same character in a lot of the episode. Like in a lot of the episodes we've watched, they feel like the same character. So the show needs to do a better job. Like obviously they're not, but the show should do a better job of presenting them or of having them present different sides. Like you want to have your Captain America and your Iron Man in Civil War presenting different opposing sides to issues and having Daenerys make hard choices. In the show specifically, because at this point in the book, you don't know it's Barristan Selmy. Right. So that's like, if you're going to make big changes like this, you're going to have to make strong choices on this as well. But again, I liked it because they needed to establish, like as a show, they needed to establish the new character as Dario, who, again, if you're not paying close attention, you're probably like, I don't remember who that guy is.
Right, I know, yeah.
But you need to, like, especially this version of the character has even less screen time for the actor to be like, I'm a character that you as a watcher of the show need to like. I don't have a lot of time to do this. Let's make very broad strokes to make sure that we can get you good.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Anything else to say about 503?
I'm good to move on to 404.
Oh, you're right. 403, I meant. Let's go to 404. All right. Okay. All right. I do like Brian Cogman as a writer on the show.
Yes.
He should have had more than one episode a season.
Yes.
He's, I think, one of the showrunners for the Amazon Lord of the Rings show. So it makes me excited to watch it because, like, I do think the very end of this episode aside, I like the way that he handles the material. So, leads to the question, where do you want to begin, or do you have any notes to introduce this episode?
Sadly, this was one episode that I didn't take notes on, and then, usually if I don't take notes, that means like, yeah, I liked it. Oh, that's right. I forgot what happened in the episode, but it must have been like pretty close to the books because I'm like, oh, I'll just talk about what happened in the books. I think I was going to, but I do remember watching it like they didn't do like a Tyrion thing and then a bunch of other stuff and then back to Tyrion and then other stuff. It just had like boom, story. It's probably like 10 stories, each of them 6 minutes long or something. But that's kind of how I felt. It was like, wow, they really hit on some good stories and they hit on it very well. Yep. Like I just...
Yep.
I like this episode. It was good. Episode 2, where Joffrey dies, probably up there in one of the best episodes. But this was a good one too.
Yeah, I actually I would say episode 2 is probably the best episode we watched. This one is second, and then episode
probably
one is third. And I really hated episode. I didn't really hate it. Like, I got to watch it with my wife, which was fun, and it wasn't violent, but it was also... all right, so we'll start in Marine. So, Gray Fox is trying to learn a new language.
Very hard to do.
And then they infiltrate the city, give the slaves a bunch of weapons because they're like, hey, there's 3 slaves to every 1 master, which I feel like the math doesn't work out for overwhelming odds. Like, I feel like the Knights of the Dinner Table would take issue with that and be like, I don't think that works. I don't think 3 to 1 is good enough numbers, especially because generally speaking, your slave population is probably going to be underfed and weak and also not know how to wield weapons. luckily they have the Unsullied there to help them out.
I
So
love
they
the
round up all
Unsullied.
of the masters. This was the part that I was kind of like, I think they were trying to go for something, and I don't know how well it worked. But so they create an uprising. They round up all of the masters, and then Barristan Selmy tries to sell the coffee of mercy to Daenerys, and Daenerys is like, because he poses it as like, sometimes when faced with an injustice, it's better to show mercy, like a kingly act of mercy. And she kind of just like looks back at him with this cold stare because, well, she looks back at him with a cold stare, and she's like, the best thing to stop injustice is to offer justice, and proceeds to crucify every single one of the masters, in both like a satisfying but also a kind of terrifying way.
Yes. No, well then you remember they did this to children.
So here's the thing. Barristan Selmy has never been a slave, and Daenerys has been as close to a slave, if not actually has been a slave.
Yes.
So Barristan Selmy is basically saying, like, the equivalent would be like, I know that the rich people exploited all of the other people to get rich, and if all things remained equal, would never give any of the money back, but we should still bail them out because it's a nice thing to do. And Daenerys is like, or we could read the law and just obey what laws we have set down and do that. So I think that's the biggest difference, is like, these people who have lived the privileged life, let's show them even more privilege. And she's like, no, let's just take them out. And like you said, they thought it was fine to just sacrifice for no other reason than to intimidate 164 children. So it's, yeah.
I mean, that's a hard thing. Like, do you agree or disagree? Like, the good thing is, like, we don't have to agree or disagree because it's a TV show.
But it opens up the question, right? Is Daenerys being as cruel as the Masters? And it's like, that's a good question. I know where I stand on it, but it's different for every person.
Right. And actually, what Daenerys does kind of cause some problems. Because if you're, like, watching this happening and you're on the side of the slave masters, you're like, oh, that's it. We're going to get our revenge right now on Daenerys. And instead, like, if she set them free, then it's like, well, yeah, we lost all of our slaves, but, you know, like, we're still alive and stuff. It's like, oh, okay, like, God, that sucks. Versus like, oh, you just murdered my friends. That's it. We're going after you. We're going to attack your city and we're going to do this. So Barristan is, like, politics-wise, probably kind of right on this. Is like, don't, like, hurt them a little bit, but don't do this to them. Because if you hurt them a little bit and send them running, all their friends are going to look at them and say, like, oh, that sucks to be you. Bye. But now that you're, like, killing them, it's like, oh my God, this could happen to me. It could happen to me. Nuh-uh. We're going to stop this. So in that regards, that's where Barristan is correct. However,
right,
I'm on the side of Daenerys.
Yeah, I mean, here's the other thing. If you show them mercy, like, you have... So I guess it's like, what do you have a bigger fear of? Do you have a bigger fear of losing morality for your entire, what is it now, 30, 40,000 person army and civilization? Or a couple of rich people that you've already proven you can overthrow? Right? So, like, that's the choice. And if you show mercy, like I said before, if you show mercy to a bunch of people who have, like, have had mercy given to them their entire life, and taken advantage of it, like, there's an argument. Yeah, I think Daenerys made the right choice, especially, like, it's a fantasy setting.
Right.
And part of it is also, like, the power trip. Like, when people say, like, oh yeah, nothing good ever happens in Game of Thrones, like, evil is never punished. It's like, bro, are you watching Daenerys' story? That's all I have to say.
Me too.
So let's go to the Narrow Sea. We're gonna go kind of in order of like small to large.
Okay.
So, well, we're gonna go small, a bit larger, really large, small, small to finish. So, in the Narrow Sea, for some reason, Peter Baelish decides to confess all of his crimes to Sansa.
Yeah.
And we discover that. So, at the end of the last episode, I thought. So, in episode 2, I thought that the Tyrells, including Margarine, were part of the plot to kill Joffrey. Like, I thought they had set it in motion. And then when Peter Baelish was revealed, I was like, oh, maybe Middlefinger was behind it for some reason. And then I thought Tywin might have been behind it. Well, Peter Baelish confesses to poisoning Joffrey. After Sansa, I mean, Brian Cogman writes Sansa pretty well too, because Sansa, like, he was like, oh, I did it because I like to create a little chaos. And she's like, BS. He's like, yes. Fine, I have new friends. I have friends, okay? I'm not alone in this world. And that the necklace had the poison in it, which I was like,
I have new friends, Sansa.
I have new friends, and I can still not speak past my teeth.
I still don't open my mouth very wide, do I? But I accentuate a lot with my lips.
I hate it so much.
He didn't have to portray him this way. He didn't. It's like, oh, I know. Let's make him sneaky and schemy, because that's what he's like, and he will portray himself that way. Again, a cameo of a chameleon actor. We're like, oh.
So does this happen in the books? Does he like talk to Sansa and basically just confess all of his crimes to her?
Yes.
Why?
I don't know.
Why does he do this?
I don't know. We don't know. I don't know yet. I really don't know. I'm not all the way through Feast or Dance yet. I don't know. I've only had 2 Sansa scenes in Feast so far. So, and yes, Peter Baelish is in them. Maybe there were 3. No, there were 3 so far.
So does he tell her at the end of Storm, or is this stuff that's happening in Feast?
He tells her at the end of Storm. I think he wants to develop a relationship with her.
It just seems so random. Like,
it does, and apparently his motives are unclear. Like, it's not quite sure why he did this. So,
well, in the show, I guess maybe he sensed that the Lannisters are getting weaker, and that House Tyrell would be a better place to go. Which I don't quite understand why, but sure.
Yeah, I don't know either, to be honest. But what's really interesting is that there was a couple pieces of dialogue that maybe is going to happen a little bit later. It probably does happen a little bit later. But, at first I didn't really like the middle finger scenes in the books. But now, like, I'm excited to read about it. Because just kind of the way he talks about things makes it very interesting. I know that sounds like really weird, but later, he's like, oh, whatever, this or this. And Tyrion's like, Middlefinger is making money appear out of nowhere. Like, this is happening. Like, what's going on? Like, how does he just have all this money to spend here and there and like do all this stuff? This is like really scary right now. And then, to have Middlefinger, basically he talks about this like a game. So Cersei's line, like, when you play the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die. And then maybe we'll find out a little bit later on. But Peter Baelish talks the exact same way, where he treats everything like it's a game board. And these are game pieces to be pushed around and make maneuvers and things like that. And it's just really interesting to read and hear him talk about it that way. And That's what I liked about it in the end, where I'm like, ooh, I definitely want to read a little bit more about this, because he's, in a way, kind of training Sansa up, and you're not quite sure why, and I don't know why. So I'm not there yet, or maybe I'll never find out by the time I'm done with Dance with Dragons. Maybe I'll just never know, but right now, yeah, I don't know why he's kind of coaching up Sansa. It's very interesting, though. Very interesting.
So do you feel like the writers are doing him justice on the show?
They're making him more intense. Like I said, I think he's Johnny Depp, just kind of sitting back, kind of like a chess master. That's really what he's like. He's like a chess master, and he sees his objective, like, oh, this is the goal. I have to win this, and here are the rules, and this is how they're gonna move their stuff that they have. This is what they're gonna do, but what can I do? How can I achieve my goal? What am I gonna do? How can I manipulate these pieces and these players in order to get to my goal? How can I throw them off balance while I do this over here and that over there and just make it? And it's really interesting. But they're going to have a problem in Feast. I don't know what the showrunners are going to do. Again, they've read Feast, they've read Dance, and if they're reading the same thing I'm reading, they're probably going, okay, what are we going to do about this? Yeah.
I don't know, dude. We're going to see.
We're going to find out.
Do you have anything else about the Narrow Sea?
I do not. Thank you for letting me do my little Peter Baelish thing. Because he's
I'm
interesting,
glad.
very fascinating character, but he's still Middlefinger.
Well, that's the thing. That's why I was wondering, because he's just like this annoying dude in the show that's supposed to be like this like mastermind manipulator and stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know. He's like, Varys is great. I think the actor who plays as Varys does a great job, even if like some of his lines of dialogue are weird. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm in for it. But all right, let's switch over to King. Speaking of Varys, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, my last thought about about Middlefinger is that maybe it is the way the actor's portraying him, like, oh, I was behind it the whole time and I didn't know it. Handlebar twisting mustache, yeah, like, oh, it does seem a little bit not fully get me that the actor is the character. Yeah, I think there was something else I was going to say, but that's what I got for now. Oh, I remember. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No.
So here's what happens to Sansa in the book. She goes with Middlefinger to Middlefinger has land. He's actually like the Lord of the Fingers, which you can see it on the map. It's like the islands that kind of jut out into the sea. So he's actually Lord of the Fingers, and he's really well respected, and everybody loves him there. And I don't know if they're going to do it in the show. That's where I was going with that. Is like, so Sansa kind of gets to see where Middlefinger had his childhood and how he grows up, and all these people are like, oh yeah, we raised him since he was a little toddler. Yeah, now look at him. Like, wow, we're so proud of him. Master of coin at King's Landing. Now he's, like, wow, he's always been so nice and generous to us. Like, what a great, like, I love this boss. Like, this is really cool. And, like, he's just a completely different person. And then they continue on their path to the Vale. But I don't know if that's going to be in the show. Like I said, there's problems. Like, there's a lot. There's so many characters and extras and settings and this to add to the story. And it's like, ugh. They're gonna run into some issues. Those are my last thoughts.
No, I really do hear what you're saying, and like it makes me nervous. But
yeah, it should.
I'm sure I'm sure these guys know what they're doing. It's not like whatever. I mean, every single episode has got like at least a 90% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, it is compelling television. I agree.
All right. So King's Landing.
Yes.
Bronn calls Jaime out on his BS, asks Jaime if he's visited Tyrion, and I love the scene. I loved it so much that I like recounted it moment for moment to my wife. I was just like, oh my god, that scene with Bronn, and like he's fighting Jaime, and he's like, Jaime, like when Tyrion was captured, he called for you because he knew that you would do anything to save him. And like it's kind of like this wake up call, and it establishes this. I think Brian Cogman really likes writing Jaime, but it establishes this moment of like, man, maybe I should go and see my brother and see what's going on. And you have this great moment between Jaime and Tyrion where like Tyrion's like, look, all I want you to do is break me out. He's like, I can't betray my sacred oaths. He's like, your sacred oaths, like when you killed the freaking king. And that, that was great.
Again, Jaime, poor Jaime, always misunderstood. Always. And Tyrion never asked him why. Nobody ever asks him why.
No one does.
That's the kicker, right?
Jaime then talks to Cersei, and Cersei's like, standoffish, and he's like, and she's like, you won't do everything for me anymore. Like, what do you mean? It's like, go kill Sansa. Like, if you did that, like, I'll send you away to go kill. And he's like, I just got here. And he's like, I know why he doesn't want to leave. He's like, I want more of my sweet Cersei Nuki. But she's like, she's just like, you have to go kill Sansa. Oh, if you're not going to, then there's nothing else for you to do here, King's Guard or whatever. And so then he goes to Brienne, and one of my favorite scenes. I know I'm just going through all of what.
That's okay. That's okay.
And like Jaime basically, the Valyrian steel sword that his father gave him, he gives to Brienne with the new suit of armor and Podrick Payne. And I was like, this is awesome. I found out none of that happens in the book. No. But Brienne, like, it's really cool that Brienne named the sword Oathkeeper, even though she's like failed to keep any of her oaths the entire show. Like, I will protect you, Renly. Renly dies. I will protect you, Lady Catelyn. Catelyn dies. I will find the children for you, Catelyn. Can't find the children. So I'm like, I'm glad you named it Oathkeeper because you're terrible at keeping them. I guess the only thing she did well was like deliver Jaime back to Cersei. So maybe she's good at it.
You only need 2 to get a winning streak.
That's true. And then they leave, and there's this really touching moment where he's just like, goodbye, Brienne. And it's like, for some reason, it feels very powerful. Like, they're very good actors because, like sometimes you'll say like, all right, bye, dude. And you're just like, okay, I'll see you later. But like, there was something significant about it where it wasn't just like, goodbye for now. It was like, goodbye. And because this world is so terrible, we may never see each other again.
Yeah.
And it was all conveyed like using close-ups. Great stuff. Like I said, Michelle McLaren, I think I said her name wrong earlier, but Michelle McLaren does a great job directing this episode, like through and through.
It definitely had a different feel than the last 2 episodes, for sure. Just like the camera shots and the decisions.
Camera shots.
The
there was a lot better. There was a lot better shot choice and shot compositions were a lot better. They said something in the behind the episode that I wanted to just like slap D.B. Weiss and David Benioff about the end of the episode, but so how
the end? Yeah.
What did you enjoy? Are you enjoying the sort of divergence from the books? Like what I would say is it goes into a little bit more fan service territory, which is kind of dangerous.
That's okay. So he sends Brienne off to find Sansa, but he does it from the office of the King's Guard, because he's now Lord Commander of the King's Guard. So he sends. I don't know if that was established, but he's Lord Commander, and he's actually very proud of that, and that's something to be very proud of. And it's a big title. He doesn't have a sword hand, but he's Lord Commander, and he knows what to do. And that's what's really cool. He's like, I know what to do. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And then got to train him up. Okay. We're going to, and it's really cool. Like it's kind of full circle from being a captive, losing your hand. And that was when he hit complete bottom. And then Bran took him out of that bottom. And then he went back and rescued her, became a knight. In that moment, he became a knight and took her back, got the woman of his dreams, and got rebuffed. Obviously in the books version.
Right.
But he gets rebuffed later. And, his dad wants him to inherit the land, and he says no. And he's, all right, I'm kind of where I'm supposed to be. He feels that. And that's really cool. It's really satisfying to read that. He's like, yes, this is where I'm supposed to be. And then so now he's like commanding things, and he looks at Brienne and he's just like, I trust you more than anybody to go find Sansa Stark. And not to kill her, but to save her.
So is Brienne in the Kingsguard then?
She is not.
Okay.
But he does give her the Valyrian steel sword, which is so awesome. And she goes off, and that was the last we see of Brienne in Storm of Swords. So she goes off, and she's in a pretty bad skirmish. This is in Feast. And that's when Pod comes and saves her, just like Pod came and saved Tyrion. So
that's how Podrick Payne gets back into it. Okay.
Yes. And they just have them do a travel log together, which is cool too. No
and that's
stealing
why she's
a word from Brandon Sanderson.
So that's basically when, like that truncated thing. So he comes back in and saves her, and now he's a regular person. So, okay, all right,
Yeah,
cool. All right, I like it. Okay.
The only other thing in King's Landing was and we didn't talk about the Tywin and Tommen scene, which was really cool.
No, we haven't. Well, I just blew through all of the Jaime stuff. So let's talk about.
I see.
Let's talk about the rest of the stuff. So,
there's one Jaime thing you didn't mention. Jaime and Tyrion having their chat.
I did say that.
Oh, you did. Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's
okay.
My bad.
It's okay. I did like that though. I like all of the Jaime stuff in this episode.
Yes, very well done.
Did you want to comment on anything in the Jaime Tyrion scene?
Loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Okay. Olenna prepares to return to Highgarden and tells Margarine that she had a hand in Joffrey's death, which, like, the way that they have it juxtaposed against Middlefinger confessing makes you think that Middlefinger's new friends are the Tyrells. So I was right and wrong. I was right that it was Middlefinger and the Tyrells, but I thought Margarine might have known about it. She didn't. And then the grandmother, old lady Tyrell, is like, but I couldn't have you marry someone cruel. So it's kind of sweet, but also a little anticlimactic. It's like, oh man, I thought it might have been someone else who killed, or like I thought there would be some like other potent or powerful thing, and it's just like, no, it's just a grandmother's love.
Somebody help that poor boy.
Poor boy indeed. And then she's like, you need to make sure that you get your hooks in Tommen, which leads us to Tommen and the scene with Tommen and Tywin. Go ahead, you can go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah, the Tommen and Tywin scene was really cool. What did all those other kings lack? Thanks for a moment. Wisdom. I really appreciated that, and that was so different than Tywin trying to school Joffrey. It was like, This is someone who's learning and thinking and really considering, like, and understanding the weight of the office, and that's really cool. Tommen's way too young in the books, way too young, so he's just like, I want to joust, I want to do this, and he rides ponies and things like that, and but then he starts getting trained. This is in Feast. He starts getting trained by Sir Loras.
Interesting. Okay.
It's cool. Yeah. He starts getting trained by Sir Loras on the lance and horsemanship, and so all of a sudden the Tyrells are really starting to
dig their roots in. Yeah,
they are. But back to this episode. Indeed, Margarine has starting to plant her little claws in him. The evening visit was kind of interesting.
Well, before we go to that, I liked the discussion between Tywin and Tommen, and it established it because you have to really quickly establish Tommen and why people like him. And they didn't really talk about this, but like you talk about it a lot, how Tyrion likes Tommen a lot. The thing that was really interesting about that as well is Cersei is in the scene, and they talk about this on the inside of the episode, so it's worth pointing out. Cersei is in the scene, but she's like, I'm mourning my son. Can we do this at another time? And Tywin is like, I don't care about your feelings, Cersei. I need to train up the next king because we need to have a good king and a king that I can control. So like, I thought that
I'm
was
sad about Joffrey, but like not.
Right. Yeah. It's like, and like you said, the way that he controls Tommen is like measured voice, smart lessons. And it just reminds me of that one talk that they had about like when Tywin was like, you need to learn how to control your son, Cersei. And like I mentioned it a couple episodes back about how like it just kind of like went way over his head. Like Tywin is so unaware of himself that he secretly has to be pretty happy that Joffrey is dead.
Yeah.
Because he barely could control Joffrey. I mean,
right.
The wedding was, if there was any proof in the pudding, it's like the wedding was it, where everyone is disgusted by this thing that he's doing, and Joffrey doesn't care. He loves it and wants to up it. And it seems like at some point he was just going to have the troop either die or kill Tyrion. Speaking of Tyrion quickly, also the fact that they give that Jaime gives Bronn gives Podrick Tyrion's axe was another one of those moments where it's like it's very fan service heavy, but it's great. Okay,
it's very good.
So Cersei is nervous that the Tyrells are going to put their hooks in Tommen, which I don't know if Cersei likes Tommen more than her other children. Because, like, remember, she was going to give him poison in Blackwater. Probably because it was the only child she had left at the time.
Right,
so
because Marcella's in Dorne and Joffrey's, like, fighting.
Well, Joffrey's back in his quarters.
Right. That's right.
Okay, so then we get to the midnight tryst, which I called every 16-year-old boy's dream. Because Margarine Tyrell basically goes in there to like flirt and seduce him, and she's like this very attractive older lady, and like it's
well,
kind
older
of
than Tommen lady, yes.
What?
Like not
right.
older lady, but older than
no,
Tommen.
no,
Yeah.
older. She's just like older than he is, like a couple years older. Like I would imagine if he's like because in my mind he's like 16 at this point, and the actor at the time was 17.
Wow. So different. Like
I mean, it makes it
so different.
It makes it less creepy. I don't know if that happens in the book where she like meets with him in secret and like starts flirting and seducing him.
Does not
but I
happen.
do love that moment at the end where she's like giving him like the really heavy eye look, and then she like moves in to kiss him, and then like bends over and kisses him on his forehead. I was like, oh.
The come hither look from Lion King.
Yeah. The what?
The come hither look from Lion King. When Nala looks up at Simba, the come hither look.
The come hither look leading into the forehead kiss was
yes.
Like, that's funny.
You know what? Now that I mention it, yeah, Natalie Dormer probably looks like a lion more than a rose. She probably would play a Lannister very well because I think she has that Nala come hither look from Lion King. She had that look down. I was like, oh my gosh.
Like I feel bad for I don't feel bad for the actor, but man, Dean Charles Chapman really like he was probably like, all right guys, can you clear the set for like 20 minutes? Just give me a moment guys, leave the lotion.
So he's 8 years old, King Tommen the First Baratheon, a boy king of 8. But I liked it how Sir Pounce got a shout out, but I was sad that Lady Whiskers and Boots did not.
Oh, booties.
Yeah, and then also, what about that other cat, the tomcat that Arya was trying to chase? That's That's a pretty mean cat. Oh, I can't believe I forgot the name of it. But that's a pretty mean cat right there.
No, Sir Pounce. Did you have any notes about the midnight meeting of marriage discussion?
No, I just wanted to name drop the kittens.
Yay, they're good kitties.
They
Anything
are.
else to say about King's Landing?
No, I don't. Thank you for asking. That's well done.
No problem. All right, so let's go to the wall. Let's go to the
wall.
I really love this because we finally get to see Jon Snow commanding. And I feel like the show, like you talked about how you really wanted to see Jaime be leader of the Kingsguard. We don't get enough moments of Jon Snow showing how awesome he is. And so what was nice about this episode is like he got to show him, you got to see him inspire people. Like with like you got to see him train them up and like teach them something about the wildlings. Like most of them have 2 weapons, so you have to disarm them. And then that naturally leads into like, hey, look, that guy looks familiar. Oh, that's Locke. That's the guy who's supposed to go up there and kill Jon Snow and kill
Bran and
kill
Rickon.
Bran and Rickon. But
Which I forgot when I saw him. I was like, whoa, what's Locke doing there? And then I looked back on my notes and I'm like, oh yeah, that's fine.
I did not forget. I was like, I remember this.
That's awesome that you remember.
Because George's writing is embedded in my brain. No, I'm kidding. So I really like in that scene though. What's his name? As David Benioff once called them, the old high school coach who had seen the old high school PE teacher who had seen the school in its glory days and now is just disappointed with what it's become. He's like, he's like, Jon Snow, why are you out here fighting? You're a steward. Me. And I'm like, but he was the steward he was like the steward of like the commander. So like, shouldn't he be your steward now? But they have that moment like when he's walking away and he holds up his sword and it's just like this, it's this small moment where it's just like, he is more than this, and this jerk is trying to keep him down. And it's a small little moment, but it's great.
It was great.
Alistair Thorne.
It was very good.
And then Slint is like, you need to be worried because, like, eventually, you're the acting commander now, but these people like Jon Snow better, and you could be voted out as actual commander. So maybe you should allow him to take men to Craster's Keep so that the mutineers can kill him off. And Alistair likes that idea. And so they go to the dining hall. And he's like, John, I'm going to let you do your thing, but you can only take people who volunteer. And it's like that moment where you're like, all right. This is the moment where John will inspire people. And it was good. I liked it. I liked that moment. Including Locke, who's like a recruit. And he's like, oh, but you're a recruit. It's like, but I'm a fighter. Okay, we'll take you. Anything to say about the being at the wall, being in Castle Black?
Yeah. So they don't go off to get Craster. This is where it diverges from the books. At this point, the wildlings have made it to the wall. From the north. And from the south. Maybe not all of them. Well, definitely the ones from the south make it to the wall.
Okay.
Because they make the climb and then they run around. And I mean, they should have already been there. So, like, I'm a little concerned because Jon kind of needs to be at the wall when the wildlings attack. And you can't go all the way to Craster's Keep and then come all the way back, and then the wildlings attack. Like, that's not going to happen, because to get to Craster's, it's not just like, a 6-hour ride out to Craster's Keep and back. No, it's like a couple of days out there. And the wildlings have already made it to the wall by then, and Jon's not there, and he needs to be there. Like, something super significant happens. So, I don't know what's going to happen. I just, I saw that and I just went, this is really cool. But it's different. But then, for the life of me, I could not remember what happened to the mutineers. I think one of two things happened. One, the whites descended on them and killed them all. Two, the wildlings descended on them and killed them all. Either way, they're gonna get killed. But that was my thoughts on that.
So, like, we talk about diversions. Remember with Daenerys going to that one town and, like, her dragons are stolen?
Yes.
And you remember that in season 2? So I wonder if it's going to be another situation where they're like, we need to give Jon Snow something more to do. Because we realize after watching season 3 that he didn't do anything. Like...
They could have done more.
Oh, my God.
They could have done more with him.
Dude, do you realize, like, all of season 3, he was nowhere near the wall?
I
do. Like, he climbs over the wall, and then at the end, he gets back. And I'm like, that whole season, he wasn't at the wall. It felt like he didn't get to make any... Anyway.
This was Jon's book. Storm of Swords. He played a huge role in it. Huge role. And his role... I guess, parallels with Jaime's in a way.
That's actually interesting, yeah.
Yeah. Because I remember you and I were talking earlier about, like, two characters who are, like, really the same, but they're on, like, different paths. And they end up, like, being different people. And in the end, though, you realize that, no, they were different people to begin with. And, but yeah, Jaime and Jon, I feel like, are kind of on similar path. Like they both were off well, and then they were both captured, and they were both trying to make their way back to where they belong, and then they both hit a low point. Obviously, Jaime's low point was when his hand got cut off, and Jon's low point was when he had to betray the wildlings and leave Ygritte behind and head back to the wall. Like those are both their low points, and then he gets shot. But really, the bite of betraying his love was really the low point for him. More of an emotional scarring versus Jaime's like hand scarring, but I don't think I think they're both pretty, as far as like level of how much they were affected, it was probably like on par with both.
I wonder if they ever look back and think like, because they show kind of like how Ygritte is poorly dealing with the fact that she had to shoot at Jon Snow, but also that Jon Snow is left. Like, it's changed her character. And we know that she could have killed him. We didn't talk about this, but in the first episode, they're like, you're the best with a bow. You could have easily killed him, but you chose not to. It would be nice if they devoted a bit more time to Jon reflecting on his relationship with Ygritte and being, like, sad about it. Like, in a different way. It's probably subtext, but they should bring it more to the forefront somehow. And I can just leave it blank and say, like, they should have done this and not offer any reasons why, because they were paid millions of dollars to solve these problems. So.
Well, Ygritte and Jon really develop a really strong relationship. Like, on the level of Avatar.
I think they did I think they did a good job in the show. Like, okay. I think they did a pretty good... I think they did a pretty good job. I feel like they're also limited by the amount of episodes they have, that they feel like they can't do as much as they want to. Which, again, I'm not going to go into it.
Sure. Cut the scene with Pod and the 3 whores. Like, that's like one scene where I'm like, they could just... Like, my life would have been fine without that scene.
Like, okay, here's something else. Like, you talk about, like... characters that were just like completely useless. Like, why don't you make Roz the person who sneaks Sansa out? And then have Tyrion shoot her, but then like find a way to bring her into Varys's inner circle and have it like it was just a flesh wound, instead of just like giving her up as like the last whore that Tyrion was with so Joffrey could kill her. Then you wouldn't even have to have that goofy fool character. And you're keeping it with whatever you want to in the show, and like in the character you made, and give her more significance that way.
That would have been really good, actually. Having Roz sneak Sansa out, that would have been like, really good. That I could have, but the only reason why they couldn't do that is because the fool had to be at the wedding, because he's the fool, he's the entertainment. You're not going to have a whore at the wedding.
I mean, yeah, but the fool... It seemed like the fool snuck in to get her out. And again, semantics there. Again, if she's working with Varys and if she's working with Littlefinger, then she probably knows how to sneak around and get into the castle. I don't know. Like you said, you bring up a better point, but also for some reason Brienne was there.
That's true. They could have also had Shay sneak her out, because we already know that Shay is the handmaiden to Sansa. So they could have had Shay sneak her out instead of Dantas.
Except she's already left.
Right. Well, don't make her leave. She's still there.
I don't think you'd have ever seen Roz in episode 2 because George R.R. Martin didn't create her, even though he teased that he might put her in some material.
But she's already dead now at this point.
Yeah, she's already dead, but like I don't think she's not in any of the episodes he wrote, so
yeah, that's true.
I don't think he wanted her. Anyway, talk about getting way off topic.
No, it's not that off topic because like
I guess not. It's still we're still talking about the episode,
right?
And, like events in the episode
and different choices that they could make. They could definitely have Roz, because Roz and Shay looked at each other like, we have to take care of her. Like, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And it's like, great promise. No progress, no payoff. This would have been a huge payoff. We're getting her out. That would have been a huge payoff. Now, there's lots of questions, but if you know that they're going to do this, you can then reverse engineer it to make sure that all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted. Like, see what I'm saying? Like they could have.
No, I know. You don't have to tell me.
You're right. You're right. I don't have to tell you.
I'm watching the show and like I know. Let's go. So Beyond the Wall.
Yes.
So, I'm just gonna talk about Bran quickly, and then I'll talk about the mutineers. So Bran, uses they start hearing things, and then Bran uses Summer to see what's going on, stumbles upon Craster's Keep, sees that Ghost is in a cage, and then Summer falls into a hole.
No,
and then,
Summer!
And so they go after Summer, and then the mutineers capture Bran. And Bran, in order to save Mira?
Mira.
In order to save Mira, he's like, I am Bran Stark. And the mutineers are like, ooh, this is quite a prize. The thing I was thinking was like, if they had done a better job of making a relationship between Bran and Mira, then that moment where he feels like he's forced to say something would be a lot more compelling.
I felt like they had a look there. Like he looked at her and was just like, oh my God, I kind of love her. And then he did that.
I think that they needed to do more work on the back end to establish it.
100% agree with you.
So
I've talked about this in other episodes too.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
But like you could see that because probably only because we talked about it, but like you don't see it in the show.
No.
And you know, I'm sure Benioff would say, "Oh well, our viewers are so smart that they probably could have put that connection together without us having to actually show it."
Yeah, I mean, like, the viewers are smart so that those two dingbats don't have to be.
Right, but then it's like, oh yeah, but let's change Asha's name to Yara because they can't come up with that. And you know what? While we're changing names, we could have Melisandre. Why do we have Missandre? Why don't we change her name so it doesn't sound so much like Melisandre? And then there's another name that, like, I just was, like, mixing up. And it wasn't Tyrell and Martell. This is something different. But they could have if they're gonna change names. Hey, why even have Rickon? Why not just have like Star Kid Roundup minus Rickon? Like, okay, for making these changes. Sorry.
No, it's all like these are all good questions.
Yeah, this doesn't happen in the books. Bran does not go back to Craster's. This doesn't happen at all. So this is where I'm interested. Like this is big. Like this isn't like, oh, my dragons are taken, but I'm gonna find them and resolve this at the end of the season. This is like something kind of serious right now because Jon might find Bran. Oh, here's another thing. Jon knows that Bran's alive. Like, there was like a piece of dialogue that I heard. I was like,
Yeah.
what? He knows that they're... Oh, Sam tells him, right?
Yeah. And then he's like, because Sam's like, oh, we made a mistake by sending Gilly to Molestown. And he's like, do you know how hard it was for me not to leave this wall and just go and get Bran?
Yeah. Well, Jon Snow is supposed to, like, Bran forbids Sam from telling Jon, like, make this and like swear an oath to me on your night's watch, and he does. So Jon thinks that Bran's still dead.
A little bit.
And yet now they're Jon and Locke are riding up to get to Bran.
Yeah, a little bit. It's just like just feels
like it's very different than what's going on right now. Probably from what you know from Dance too.
Yeah,
it's extremely different.
Yeah, well, I was gonna give a shout out to Bern Gorman, who like I thought I didn't know this at the time that it was new to the books, but I was like, oh, this character that Bern Gorman is playing. Now do you know who I'm talking about when I say Bern Gorman?
Yes, I do.
You know, he's drinking out of the skull and everything. Pacific Rim. So his character, it makes it sound like he is an assassin and or like a really good assassin, like what's his name?
No, Jaqen H'ghar.
Yeah, like Jaqen H'ghar, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. Oh, maybe this will be interesting and compelling and dangerous and all this stuff. And then I realized that like, oh, he's probably created just for the show.
I think the name is the same. But that's probably
just a random guy.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm trying to find the
But I love
name.
the acting. He stole the scene. He stole the scene. It was so good.
He's so good. Carl Tanner. That's the character's name. But yeah, so they give up. They also plant a seed that like the guy who killed Craster is like being belittled by Bern Gorman, and then that guy takes the baby as a sacrifice and walks back. And now we can talk about that new scene that you were talking about, where an other grabs the baby and puts it on a pedestal, and then this creature comes and picks up the baby and turns its eyes blue. How did you feel about that? What are your thoughts?
Well, obviously I don't know about that because that wasn't in, at least where I'm at so far in the novels. The only thing I can think of is Divergence. Like, they're kind of hinting at this in the story. And, you don't really know kind of what's going to become of it. As a reader, you're like, oh, I don't know what to think about it. Like, I could see it, that, like, that's what's going on in the books. Like, you can believe it. And I thought it was a really cool scene. Just like the setting of it was really scary, and just all the others are standing around, and then that one who looks different, moves different, picks him up and just touches him with the finger, changes him. Like, whoa, like that's really scary. So I thought that was really cool.
Like, so one, as a viewer, I have a couple of things. One, I don't think the show did a good job of differentiating between the whites and the others, unless you're watching a lot of the behind the scenes material. Two, if that's how others are created, are you satisfied with that answer?
Yeah.
Okay. 3, are you glad that you got to see that area that is not even really written about in the books?
Well, if they'd all been written and I read them all and then I watch it, if that's in the books, then I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Or I might be like, no way, like, you gotta hide that. You gotta keep it a secret until the very end when it's revealed. I'm not sure how I would react. But I'm pretty sure that doesn't happen in Dance. Like, you don't know about that at all from Dance.
Yeah, I don't know if they even go into it at all in Dance. I really enjoyed it until, so I know some things, and I was like, okay, but maybe this was teased in the books. And then the more I read, they were like, the showrunners were like, oh, we wanted to show something that's like, new for people who had read the books, and we thought, there's no better perspective than this baby who's like afraid of his mom. Anyway, I liked the scene until I read about it, and then I read that it diverted from the thing, and people were like, oh, but it takes it in a new and interesting and creative way. And I was like, oh God, I don't know if I like this anymore.
Because now they're kind of going off the seat of their pants.
Yeah,
and when they go off the seat of their pants, we haven't been satisfied.
Well, also that's part of it, but also I'm worried that because of the way, and I don't really have much more to say about this episode, but the way that you go about writing a book, except for him, because he turned Clash of Kings and Storm of Swords around within a year of each other. But when you go about writing a book, every detail is, especially a book like this, every detail is thought through, rewritten, this and that. And when you get on a TV production schedule, you don't have time. You're kind of like throwing out the pages as quickly as you can. So not everything is thought through all the way. And they've already proved this by choosing certain things to show, choosing different diversions to make. Like the thing with with Daenerys losing her dragons is like the dry run for how far can we push new content in the show. So that kind of gets me worried. But also, like, if they're inventing these things that are only hinted at, it makes me nervous that their ideas might not be as good or up to the level that the rest of the elements of the show are. And that makes me nervous. So that's really it. I mean, like, it's a very interesting scene. It was shot very well. I love that they did the perspective shot where you see that creature and it's frightening and you're not quite sure what's going on, and it's a good way to end an episode, but it also makes me nervous of what's to come.
Yeah, because if an other is being born, it does seem logical. Like, Craster was, sending the firstborns out, or not the firstborns, the boys out. Like, that was straight up from the books. So it might have been like George R. Martin probably said, like, oh yeah, they're being turned into others. He probably let them know that, and then they went ahead and they showed it. And, or maybe, maybe they're just like a sacrifice to the gods, and they're just left out there. Nothing takes them. They're just like left out there, and then they're gone. And it was like the spirit of the woods and the forest that did it, and it's all connected, and therefore you don't attack Craster's Keep because they kind of provide this nourishment to the forest, and the whites and the others are all connected to it, and they just like, oh, we're not going to go there. That's originally how I thought. Like, oh, it's a gift to the gods, and the gods will protect. And, like, that's what's happening. Like, you don't see it or anything. It's just, that's what's happening. Kind of like, from reading, the phrase killed Robb. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to get revengeance dropped on them so bad, so hard. The phrase they're all going to suffer. It's not going to be good. And some of it's kind of happening. You just know it's happening. And you don't see it, but you hear bits and pieces, and you know that's what's happening. Just like Craster's, like, they're not being attacked by the whites. You don't know why, but you just know that it's okay, that they're safe. But at the price, right? For Craster, it's not a price, which is gross and horrible, right? But, that's why he's very okay with it, I guess, because he's ensuring his own survival. And I just, you start, I'm kind of with you. You start changing things because, if this being, now here's the other thing too, is right. They've kind of revealed the bad guy.
Yeah.
And in the books, it's just like been this, and kind of what I believe. It's not like one bad guy controlling them all. It's sort of like a strange hive mentality, but you don't know who the queen bee is, for example. But, maybe that is what's going on, and that being really is the queen bee and controlling the hive. But I don't know. I'm not undead. I wouldn't know, and I don't live in Westeros. I don't know either.
Yeah.
But does he just like touch it and they turn into whites? Or does it have to be in that special location with some weird special power touching it? You don't see Sauron in Lord of the Rings. You don't see a lot of this inner stuff because it's dark and mysterious. And, they made a choice to reveal this stuff and show the audience this when they could have kept it as a mystery. And I don't know. I take the opinion, like, I'm kind of interested to see what they're going to do from the reader perspective, because I already know what's going on in the books and I know how that's whole set up and I understand like that constructed world. And let's see what the showrunners are doing, because they might be taking a lot of those ideas about like what's really going on that we don't know, and they're showing it, or maybe they're going their own direction, but we'll see what the consequences that come of it. So
right. As John Wick would say, consequences.
Yeah. That's my essay on that.
Do you have anything to close out episode 4, Oathkeeper?
I do not, except I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I did too. And, Brian Cogman, it was in pretty good hands. Anything else to say about these 4 episodes?
Yeah, I've got one question for you.
Okay.
Major stuff is going to go down. Are they building up the tension?
Here's why I'm going to say no. I'm sure they are, but I look at the episodes we have in front of us. Just by looking at this, like, I blame it on the way that we have streaming now and everything. And the thing that's building the tension isn't the events happening in the episode. It's looking at the little thumbnails and seeing the names of the episodes, and then me being like, okay, I'm interested to see where it's going. I guess it kind of is because I want to see what happens with Jon. I want to see what happens with Brienne and Podrick Payne. I want to see what's going on with what Middlefinger's doing and Sansa. So I guess from that angle, yeah. But I don't know if it's building tension. And maybe it's because I know kind of what happens in some cases. Like, I want to see the trial because I want to see what happens or what's going to happen. What about you? Do you think they're building up tension, or do you think they're just encouraging you to watch the next episode?
The latter. But maybe they're not right at building the tension yet. Maybe they're kind of hinting at it, but it will happen soon. Like, maybe it's like, oh, the big thing isn't going to happen for like 2 more episodes, so let this be kind of the revelry. Now let's go ahead and start ratcheting it up, and we'll see what they do. The problem is like, you and I are discussing these things, but in the end, this show is going to go down as one of the greatest television shows in all of history.
I think if that were the case, people would be talking about it still.
Wow.
So
that's right. You mentioned this, yeah.
Don't forget, like, the show's been off the air for 2 years and no one even talks about it.
That's it. Yep.
Like, that's the problem, is what like it'll if I say anything more, it'll kind of color your opinion of it
Okay.
of the show going forward. So I shouldn't say anything.
Okay.
Well, you probably have heard some of it from Jen about season 8 and how it ends, right? Not like the events, but the sort of effect that it's had.
No.
Okay. We have. Oh my god. Oh my gosh. One of the writers of season 3 isn't in this. Didn't do it. Oh my gosh, and I can't remember her name. Vanessa Taylor didn't write a single episode this season.
Oh. Between her and Brian Cogman, those were our two favorites.
Brian Cogman has one more episode.
Oh, good. Well, and George R. R. Martin.
And
So,
George R. R. Martin.
yeah, please confirm that this might have been his last episode that he wrote.
It was.
Wow. I don't know what to make of that. I mean, if you can maybe find some information about like the relationship between the showrunners and George R. R. Martin, anything in the news, since you know more about it, and I'm kind of like I'm a little pansy and I don't really want it to be spoiled too much.
No, it's fine. I'll look into it. So season 3 is the last time they had a female writer as a writer for an episode.
Wait.
So Vanessa Taylor, her last episode was season 3. And they add one more writer to the show. But after that, they don't have... It's just D.B. Weiss, David Benioff, Brian Cogman, and a new writer, starting with season 5 for the rest of the show.
What about director? Like Michelle MacLaren did this one. Do they continue with female directors?
That I'm not sure. They bring back, for episode 9, they bring back the director who did Blackwater. So,
Oh, well, yeah, of course. They have to.
because there's a big battle coming up. Is that why?
Right. Jon Snow has to be back at the wall. He's got to be back there.
But I think that's his last one, too. Yeah, I don't know if they have another female director on the show. Hold on, I'm looking through it quickly. But they bring in one of the directors from Lost for a couple episodes.
Your hot take seems to be like really a hot take here.
What hot take?
About just, I mean, your hot take was actually about like their inability to kind of like write and create female characters. And now we don't have any more like women writers for the show.
They might have some women in the room, but they don't have anyone who's helming an episode.
Who's credited for it.
Yeah. So that scares me. I didn't see any other female. After Michelle MacLaren, I didn't see any other female directors, unless this is a woman and not a... Nope, that's a guy. Yeah. But Alex Graves comes back to do a bunch of episodes.
Meat and potatoes.
Meat and potatoes.
Kind of like the director for the Harry Potter's 5, 6, 7, 1, 7, 2.
And all 3 Fantastic Beasts movies.
He's getting it done.
He's churning them out. So I guess my thing is like it feels like it started pretty good. I'm interested to see where it goes. I was really excited for this season, so I'm looking forward to the next 4 episodes. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the rest of the season. But also, sometimes when I talk to you and I actually do research into the background of the show, it just gets me depressed.
Oh.
Or like when you're like, this show will go down as one of the greatest shows in history, and it's like, but nobody's talking about it anymore. It kind of like gets me depressed. But I am interested to see where it goes. I know I come off on the show like really depressed, or like really negative and critical. But I am enjoying the show and I do like the show. I just think there was potential that was untapped in the show, and I have an idea of where it's limited by. But also I have the benefit of hindsight. So
yeah, they're gonna have major problems. It's
that's the other thing is like they probably already were gonna have problems just because like as a show, it's a great idea, but the feeling that like it sometimes feel like nothing is really happening, even though the story is moving forward, feels off. Do you know what I mean? Like, we should be able to look back on on every episode and see significant dynamic changes, see interesting story points happening. But instead, it's just like, yeah, season 3 is pretty interesting, and then there's the Red Wedding. Yeah, season 2, there's stuff that happens, and then there's Blackwater. You know, like I feel like more interesting stuff. Like, I don't know. I feel like I should feel like a lot of stuff has happened, and the characters have done a lot of things in the season, and there should be some sort of grounding moment in the season. Like, season 2 should have been about Tyrion playing the game with everyone during that clash. Focus it on Tyrion. Make more things connected to him. Like how, I hate to bring it back to Lost, because Lost is generally a terrible example to bring. But like in season 1, it was all about the island. In season 2, it was all about the bunker. In season 3, they had to deal with the fallout from the bunker. In season 5, it was about the island moving through time and the two groups of people having to navigate the different time spaces, you know. And then season 7 was all about like closing it out, but also like, God, the first half of season 7's bad. Someone could argue that all of season 7's bad, but like they go to the temple. You remember when they went to the temple?
That's right. I remember the temple.
And I was like, oh my God, this is so dumb.
Like they're just introducing things because they were here the whole time. No, they weren't. They're just putting it in here just to get around a problem that they had from before. Just to like, they don't know what to do, so they're just going to go back to the well and introduce a bunch of new characters.
But anyway, like that's what I mean is, but I don't know. I don't know.
It was a pizza delivery guy for the beginning of the story.
Oh no, I was talking about in Game of Thrones. I don't know what I would have done to make it feel like more significant stuff happened episode to episode. Because all of the people who are like, you would like this show, I do like this show, but I'm also and I hope that some of that comes through, that I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying watching the episodes, and I look forward to watching the next ones whenever I watch the first ones, and I can see how people binge watch it.
Here's what it is.
Just wish there were some changes to it.
Here's what it is. If you're like, yeah, did you like Game of Thrones? You're like, yeah, I really liked it. It's like, all right, what was your favorite part?
Tyrion. Jaime. Jon Snow in season 4.
I mean, yeah, but like
the love story between Jon Snow and Ygritte.
Usually when you're talking about something, you know, like Skyfall, what was your favorite part?
God, dude, the whole movie.
Okay. Well,
I can't really like pin it down, but I can tell you some moments that were excellently done.
Okay, so I guess that's what I mean is like when you talk about it, it's like, what was your favorite part? Like, I know for you what it was is Blackwater.
So far, yeah, Blackwater's been my favorite.
For
Although
me,
I watched it
again
and I still like it, but it moves a lot faster than I thought it did.
For me, it was probably Joffrey's wedding. I was like, what's your favorite part? I'm like, well, of this season, that's my favorite part. Anyway, so I bring that up because usually when it's something that you really like, you're like, oh man, this is my favorite part. And you talk about like your favorite part, you're like, oh man, that was my favorite part. It's like, cool. But in Game of Thrones, it's like, it's not a part, it's a storyline is your favorite. And that's what makes it hard.
Yeah.
That's what makes it hard for you to discuss and talk about. Like when we go on the podcast where you're like, yeah, don't get me wrong. Like I really enjoy it. It's like, yeah, it's hard for that to come out because it's not like, oh my God, remember this part? Oh yeah, it was just so memorable. Yeah, that was great. Things that were memorable when
Jaime tells
Daenerys. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But also when Daenerys had the dragon set the thing to the torch when she got the Unsullied, like that was like a memorable moment. So, I mean, it is a TV show. TV shows in general don't have very many memorable moments. But there are quite a few memorable moments. And I bet like in I don't know, if I ever rewatch it again, I'll probably sit back and watch and be like, oh man, that was a good moment. Like, that's right, that was very memorable. And then
that's the other thing is like I know people who are like, I won't rewatch it.
Wow.
And I'm at the part where I'm like, no, I would rewatch it. And I'm
Same.
interested to see if we'll hit a point where we're like, no, it's not worth it. But so far it hasn't happened yet. Like, there are episodes that I would like to rewatch. And I think it's also hard because like you end on episode 2 and because I watched Blackwater after watching episode 2 again, because I was like, I really want to watch something else. Like, I really want to watch the next episode. I really want to see where it goes. And to say that like episode 3 was kind of a little disappointing and really it's only kind of just, that's the other thing is like, it sometimes feels like it's disappointing on review of it. You know, like as I was watching, I was like, all right, this is a DB Weiss and David Benioff episode. And then I kind of review with you like what happened and what went down, and
right,
and it loses a little bit of its luster. Where I'm like, oh God, man, talking about it, nothing like this storyline really didn't need to be here. We really could have moved this to a different location, or we didn't have to introduce Daenerys on this episode. We could have moved her to this episode, you know.
But I do remember talking with you, like, there were some moments where we're like, oh yeah, that was great. Yeah, what a great conversation. That was so good. Like, the acting was on point.
Yeah.
There were a couple that we talk about. So, I think it's a good show as of right now. Like, I feel like they've definitely hit their stride. Season 4 has been awesome. It's been really good. Just,
yeah.
I mean, we questioned some of their story decisions, but overall, it's like really, really good.
Yeah, I agree. I will say also that like everyone said that you have to get past the first 3 episodes of Game of Thrones and then it starts getting good, and I agree, because episode 4, guess who wrote episode 4?
Who?
Brian Cogman.
Of course.
And that was my favorite episode of the first 4 episodes. Episode 4 was my favorite.
I forgot what happened in that one.
I just remember I really liked it. I think that's when they started introducing a lot of the backstory. That's when Tyrion gives Bran the apparatus to ride the horse.
Yeah.
Ned finds Gendry. That's when they have the tournament where Peter Baelish awkwardly talks about the Hound.
It's interesting that Brian Cogman was the writer for it, and he didn't make the Hound tell Sansa that himself. It's very interesting.
Maybe Brian Cogman's just a good writer. I don't know. Because I really, like, that was the episode that everything started clicking for me.
I'm just looking at, like, the number of views where it's, like, U.S. viewers in the millions. Like, man, it just keeps going up and up and up. Like,
yeah.
Season 2, Season 3, it's super high. Season 4, it's ridiculous. Season 4. We're about to watch, like, 7.2 million people just, like, tuned in. Like, oh my gosh. Probably the height of their powers right now. But as I keep scrolling down in season 6, like, they still are getting like 8 million, and what was it, season 7, they're getting like 12 million, 10 million people are viewing this stuff. And that's why, like, if DB Weiss and David Benioff try to go out and get another job, they're going to get hired, because whoever's like talking with them is like, oh yeah, so what'd you do? It's like, oh, well, we worked on one of the most successful television programs in the history of the world. And, you know, that's what I mean by it's one of the most successful shows.
No, I agree. I agree that it was successful, but it also worries me that they're not going to be able to, like, the fact that So like 13 million, almost 14 million people tuned in for the final episode, and I had maybe seen 4 episodes, and I watched the final episode.
Wow.
And the fact, like, everyone knows what Game of Thrones is because of the show, and they must have done something right because they kept fans hooked, and it kept growing its fan base. With all of that said, they ended up losing a job, the Star Wars job. They had a job gonna direct a Star Wars movie, and they were kicked off of it. So I don't know if they would ever, like, they're gonna get another job, because the reality is, if you're a white guy in Hollywood, and you have had any sort of success, and even if it ends well or badly, like, you're gonna get another job, especially when you put up these kinds of numbers. But they're not coming back for House of Dragons, which is the prequel series. They have new people coming on, because HBO had made so much money from the show. So I agree with you. We will know if this is good, if like it has cultural relevance, if the prequel show does well. If people tune in and they like it, then we'll know that the show might be redeemable at some point.
I still say that they are successful.
They were,
because they're the showrunners, and it did really well. But to get hired again based on numbers alone, like, you bring up a really good point. Like, they didn't do the Star Wars movie, and they
got fired from it.
That's right, they got fired
from it. Yeah,
probably because they wanted to do some crazy stuff, and they were like, no.
Put a pin in that. We'll talk. But when we get to the end of season 8, we'll talk about what happened to them.
Ooh, very good. I think that is my last chord of this verse of Sir Waymar P. Royce.
Sounds good to me. I am Matthew.
And I am Lucas.
We will see you for the next verse. And once again, thank you, Mike, for all of the music.